The first slide that belonged to me appeared 12 minutes into my brother's presentation. I knew it before I read a word. 3 blue circles overlapped in the center of the screen, with thin gold arrows showing the flow between the person answering questions, the person making decisions, and the person doing the actual work. I had designed that diagram at my kitchen table while eating dry cereal from a coffee mug because every bowl I owned was in the dishwasher. Evan clicked to the next slide. There was my language, my interview findings, even the phrase coordination burden, which my advisor had circled twice before grudgingly allowing me to keep. Only the title was different. Family Logistics Optimization, the screen announced. My mother leaned toward my father, smiling as if Evan had just cured something. He was up until 2 fixing those slides, she whispered. On stage, my brother was explaining my thesis to a room full of professors and hospital executives. He wore the navy suit Mom had bought him for graduation, and he had one hand tucked casually into his pocket, the way I'd taught him to stand when he called me in a panic before his admissions interview. Then Dad looked at me and murmured, "Now this is useful." The question wasn't whether Evan had stolen my work. I was looking at the evidence. The question was why neither of my parents looked surprised. To explain why I didn't stand up right then, you have to understand that my family could make something outrageous feel ordinary before you had time to object. 4 years earlier, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, arguing with an insurance company about a shower chair. The chair wasn't even for either of my parents. It had belonged to my aunt's partner, Marcy, after a hip replacement. Marcy was 58, stubborn, and perfectly capable of calling the insurance company herself. But she had called my mother first, and my mother had said, "Lena knows how to talk to those people." This was not true. I hated talking to those people. I was simply willing to remain on hold longer than anyone else in the family. "Can you clarify what you mean by medically unnecessary?" I asked the representative. Because she medically cannot get into her shower. Across the table, Dad was slicing a summer sausage directly on a paper towel. He offered me a piece by holding it up on the knife. I shook my head. Mom stood at the counter packing leftovers into containers no one had requested. "Don't let them bully you," she said. "They're not bullying me. They sound like they are. You can't hear them. I can tell." The representative returned from another hold and explained that the wrong billing code had been submitted. I wrote down the correct one, called Marcy, left instructions on her voicemail, and then noticed Evan's resume under my legal pad. "Why is this here?" Mom didn't turn around. "He has an interview Thursday, and he needs someone to look it over." Dad chewed his sausage. "You're good with commas." My brother was 30 at the time. He lived 40 minutes away, had a bachelor's degree in business, and knew where commas went. He also knew that if he emailed Mom anything longer than a grocery list, she would eventually place it in front of me. Did Evan ask me to look at it? Mom snapped a lid onto a container. "Does he need to submit a formal request? I'm just asking if he asked." "He's busy, Lena." I looked down at his resume. The first line said he was a results-oriented professional. How busy? Dad leaned over to see what I was reading. "That looks good. It's oriented, not orientated." "See?" Dad said. "Already worth the trip." I had stopped by to deliver his prescription after the pharmacy near my office filled it. That was the trip. This was how my family worked. No one announced that I was responsible for everything. Things simply appeared near my hands. I took the resume home. I fixed the wording, removed a mysterious second page containing only 3 bullet points, and emailed it directly to Evan with a note that said, "Your mother is running an unauthorized editing service." He called 5 minutes later, laughing. "I told her not to bother you." "Did you?" "I said I'd handle it." "That is not the same sentence." "Okay, but you saw the orientated thing, right?" "I did." There was a short silence. "Bad?" he asked. "Only if the job involves words." He laughed again, and because it was Evan, because he had always known how to make dependence sound like affection, I softened. "What's the interview for?" "Assistant operations manager at St. Vincent?" "That sounds good." It could be. I mean, it's not what I want forever. What do you want forever? Don't do that. Do what? Ask reasonable questions when I'm trying to feel optimistic. I smiled despite myself. Fine. Go manage some operations. You're the best. It was one of his favorite things to call me after I did something for him. Not thank you. Not I owe you. You're the best. At the time, I was working as a program coordinator for Harbor House, a nonprofit that helped adults manage the confusion after a serious medical diagnosis. The official language on our website said we connected people to community resources. In practice, I spent most days explaining forms, finding transportation, and telling exhausted relatives that no, they were not terrible people because they had forgotten which pill was taken with food. I loved the work more than I admitted at family dinners, mostly because my father treated loving a low-paying job as evidence of poor judgment. That fall, I applied to a part-time master's program in sociology. I told my parents over Sunday dinner. Mom had made roast chicken, though it was still hot enough outside that Dad had complained about the oven being on for 2 straight hours. Evan was there with a woman named Paige. He had been dating for 6 months. Paige was a physical therapist with an unnervingly direct gaze. She had a habit of letting our family finish saying ridiculous things before she reacted, which made everyone nervous. I got accepted, I said. Mom set down the gravy boat. Accepted where? The graduate program at Fairmont State. Dad looked up from carving the chicken. Graduate program in what? Sociology. He paused with the knife pressed into a thigh joint. What do you do with a master's in sociology? I'm planning to focus on healthcare systems and family caregiving. That wasn't the question. It kinda was. Evan gave Dad a warning look. It could help her move into research or policy. Policy, Dad repeated in the tone he used for foods he didn't trust. Is Harbor House paying for it? No. Mom's eyebrows rose. Then who is? I am. That answer bothered her more than if I had asked for money. My mother liked generosity best when it could be performed quickly and remembered indefinitely. How much? She asked. I got a partial scholarship. How much is the rest? I can manage it. Dad resumed cutting. That means too much. It means I can manage it. He glanced at Mom. It was the look they used when I was being technically correct in an inconvenient way. Mom passed the gravy to Paige, though Paige hadn't asked for it. Your father and I just don't want you taking on debt for a degree that won't change anything. It'll change what I know. Dad laughed, not cruelly. That was almost worse. It was a short, surprised laugh, like I'd made a joke without realizing it. Paige stopped reaching for the gravy. I looked at my father. What? Nothing. I just wish the bank accepted knowledge for mortgage payments. I have a job. You have a cause, he said. There's a difference. Evan put down his fork. Dad. What? She knows I'm proud of her. That was one of Dad's favorite methods. He would tell you what you already knew, then attach the opposite to it and make you responsible for keeping both statements true. I'm proud of you, but you're smart, but you can handle it, so... Mom reached across and touched my wrist. We're not mocking you. I didn't say you were. You have that look. What look? The one where you decide everyone is against you. Paige stared down at her plate. Evan rubbed the side of his nose, a gesture he'd had since we were teenagers. He used to do it when Dad lectured me for staying out too late, as if secondhand discomfort counted as taking my side. I start in January, I said. I wasn't asking permission. I thought you'd want to know. Of course we want to know, Mom said. We're your parents. Then she asked Evan how the new job at St. Vincent was going, and the conversation moved on with the efficient relief of a nurse pulling a curtain around a body. After dinner, I stood at the sink, scraping plates, while Mom loaded the dishwasher incorrectly beside me. She believed plates should face outward, toward the room, as if they needed to see what was happening. You don't have to do those, she said. I know, you're upset. I'm washing a plate. I can tell when my own daughter is upset. I handed her the plate. Then why ask? Mom's mouth tightened. For a second, I felt mean. She had spent the afternoon cooking. She'd saved the crispy piece of chicken skin for me without mentioning it. Love in my family was rarely absent. It was just distributed in strange, deniable measurements. "We worry about you," she said. "You don't worry about Evan spending money. Evan isn't going back to school. He talks about it constantly. That hospital administration thing? Yes." She waved one wet hand. "That would be different." I actually laughed. He hasn't even applied, and his hypothetical degree is already better than mine. I didn't say better. You said different. It is different. He needs credentials to move up. And I don't? You're already established. I was 30, renting a one-bedroom apartment above a dentist's office and driving a car that made a clicking sound every time I turned left. Established where? At Harbor House. They depend on you. There it was. Dependability presented as a destination. Mom looked at me and her face softened. "Honey, you've never needed the kind of help Evan needs." It was meant as praise. I knew that. She probably expected me to smile. Instead, I asked, "Did it ever occur to you that I learned not to need it because it wasn't coming?" The dishwasher hummed between us. From the dining room, Dad called my name, not because he had heard us. He wanted me to help him change the password on his pharmacy account. Mom dried her hands and looked relieved by the interruption. "You're better at that stuff," she said. "I should have left." Instead, I went into the dining room, sat beside my father, and reset his password while he complained that the website had made everything too complicated. Then I wrote the new password on an index card, because if I didn't, he would call me the next morning. On the drive home, Evan called. "Mom said you got weird about school." I got weird. You know what I mean. I honestly don't. He sighed. "They're worried about money. They're worried about my money," which is a parent thing. No, a parent thing would be asking what classes I'm taking before deciding the degree is useless. I don't think it's useless. The turn signal clicked rapidly as I waited at a red light. My car did that when it rained. "Thanks. I mean, sociology isn't exactly, be careful." He laughed once. "All I'm saying is, you're already doing work you care about. That's more than most people have." It was almost exactly what Mom had said. They depend on you. You're established. You care about it. Every compliment quietly nailed me to the same spot. "What do you want, Evan?" "Nothing. You called me. I wanted to make sure you were okay." I waited. "And," he added, "if you have time, could you look at something for me?" Of course he had called because he needed something. Still, I asked what it was. "A statement of purpose," he said, "for the healthcare administration program." The light turned green. "You applied." "I'm applying. Does Mom know?" "Not yet. I don't want them getting excited before it's real." I thought about telling him no. My scholarship paperwork was due Friday. I had laundry sitting wet in my machine and a work presentation to finish. My father's pharmacy password was still written on the palm of my hand because the pen had leaked through the index card. Then Evan said quietly, "You're the only person I trust to tell me if it sounds stupid. There are sentences that feel like intimacy until you notice they are also assignments. Send it," I said. His relief was immediate. "I owe you." But we both knew he didn't. Not yet. His statement arrived before I got home. The subject line said, "Be brutal," which was Evan's way of asking for help while pretending he was brave enough to hear the answer. I opened it on my phone in the parking lot of my apartment building. He had begun with a quote from Steve Jobs. I called him. "No," I said when he answered. "You read it already?" I read the first sentence. And, "Steve Jobs has been removed from the process." That seems personal. It's an application for healthcare administration. Why are you quoting a man who sold phones? He also changed how people think. So did the guy who invented the traffic circle. You don't see him opening a lot of essays. Evan groaned. I could hear a television behind him and the soft clink of glass. Paige asked him something. "Lena says, I can't use Steve Jobs," he told her. "Good," Paige called back. "You two are enjoying this too much." I climbed the stairs to my apartment. The dentist's office downstairs was closed, but the hallway still smelled faintly like mint gloves and overheated plastic. "Why do you want this degree?" I asked. "I told you, I want to move up." "No, that's why you want any degree. Why healthcare administration?" He didn't answer immediately. Evan was good at talking when he knew where he wanted the conversation to land. If you asked him something that didn't have a polished destination, he went quiet. Finally, he said, "The hospital's a mess. Compelling. Put that. I'm serious. Nobody knows who's supposed to do what. Patients get told one thing, families get told something else. Nurses end up solving problems that aren't theirs. Half my day is apologizing for a system I didn't design. That was better than anything in his draft. Keep going. There's nothing else. There is. You just haven't turned it into business language yet." He made a small, offended sound. "I do not turn everything into business language. You referred to the refrigerator at Mom and Dad's as an underutilized storage asset. It was full of expired salad dressing. It's still a refrigerator." By the time I unlocked my apartment, Evan had told me about a woman whose discharge had been delayed for 9 hours because one department believed her partner was picking her up and another had booked transportation. Her partner had been sitting downstairs the entire time. "That's your opening," I said. "It's depressing. It's real. Can I use her story? Change the identifying details and focus on what you learned. You should be an admissions counselor. I would rather lick the hallway carpet." He laughed. "You're the best." There it was. I set my bag on the floor and stared at the wet laundry still visible through the machine's round glass door. "I'll send notes tomorrow," I said. Tomorrow's perfect. It was not perfect. Tomorrow was the deadline for my scholarship paperwork. I stayed up until 1 anyway. In January, I began classes on Tuesday and Thursday nights in a building that seemed to have been designed to punish adults for returning to school. The chairs were narrow, the lights hummed, and every classroom was either too hot or cold enough to preserve meat. Most of us arrived carrying coffee and the remains of our workdays. Dr. Meera Patel taught my research methods seminar. She was small, silver-haired, and had the unnerving stillness of someone who could wait longer than you could avoid answering. On the first night, she asked each of us what we wanted to study. A man who worked in city planning wanted to research food desserts. A woman from the county health department was interested in addiction recovery. When my turn came, I said I worked with families navigating serious diagnoses. Dr. Patel waited. I added, "I'm interested in how people get help." She kept waiting. And why they don't. Her head tilted. That is 2 continents disguised as a research question. A few people laughed. "What specifically bothers you?" she asked. I thought of Harbor House. Not the official mission or the success stories we put in the annual report. I thought about the exhausted people who came into my office with folders full of paperwork, apologizing because the folders weren't organized. The person doing the most work is usually the person no one talks to, I said. Dr. Patel nodded once. That sounds closer. At Harbor House, I started noticing it everywhere. A man named Curtis came in with his older sister, Darlene, after he was diagnosed with kidney disease. Curtis answered every medical question. He had the confident cheerfulness of someone who believed optimism counted as preparation. Diet changes, appointments, whatever they need, he told me. I'm on top of it. Darlene sat beside him with a spiral notebook open on her lap. When I asked what medications he was taking, Curtis looked at her. When I asked which clinic had scheduled his follow-up, he looked at her. When I asked whether he had transportation, he said yes, then turned to her and asked, "Thursday still good?" Darlene's mouth tightened. "No," she said. "Thursday was never good. I told you I have an audit." Curtis blinked. I thought that was next week. It is next week. So is Thursday. He looked at me as if time itself had created the conflict. We'll work it out, he said. Darlene wrote something in her notebook with enough pressure to tear the page. After Curtis went to the restroom, I asked her how she was doing. She gave me a sharp look. I'm not the patient. I know, that was all it took. She told me she had used 6 vacation days in 2 months. Curtis had 2 adult sons who called frequently and told him to stay positive, but neither lived nearby. Their mother was still alive but had limited mobility. Curtis introduced Darlene to doctors as my sister, who worries too much, then called her whenever he couldn't remember an instruction. "I love my brother," she said. "I just don't understand when loving him turned into a part-time job nobody told me I'd applied for." I wrote that sentence down after she left, not because I planned to use it, because I understood it. My parents did not become more interested in my degree once I actually started it, but they became interested in my schedule. Tuesday and Thursday nights were inconvenient times for me to be unavailable. Mom called during my 3rd week of classes. "Are you near your computer? I'm walking into seminar. It'll take 2 seconds." Things that took 2 seconds for my mother usually required a password, an attachment, and at least one call to customer service. "What do you need?" "Your father got an email from the pharmacy. Forward it to me." "He doesn't know how." "He does." Mom lowered her voice. "He's getting frustrated." In the background, Dad shouted, "I am not frustrated. The website is defective." I looked through the classroom door. Dr. Patel was arranging papers on the front table. "I have to go. Can you call after?" "It'll be after 9. We'll be awake." Of course they would. They would sit together watching television, perfectly capable of opening an email, waiting for the child who had never needed help. "I'll look at it tomorrow," I said. The silence on Mom's end was small but deliberate. "Fine," she said. "Go learn." The next morning, I found 3 missed calls from Dad and a message from Evan asking if I had fixed the pharmacy issue yet. I called him on my lunch break. "Why would you think I fixed it?" "Mom said she sent it to you." "She didn't send anything. She called while I was in class. Dad needs his refill. Then help him." "I don't have his login." I closed my office door. Neither did I until I spent 40 minutes resetting it. "Okay, give it to me. It's on an index card in the top drawer of the buffet." There was a pause. "How do you know that?" "Because that's where I put it." "No, I mean, how do you know they still have a buffet drawer?" I laughed before I could stop myself. Evan had not opened a drawer in our parents' house in 15 years. Things simply appeared for him there too, usually cooked and wrapped in foil. "You know where they live," I said. "Go help. I have work. So do I. I'm all the way across town. I'm at Harbor House," which is closer. It's 22 minutes closer. Exactly. I hung up on him. He went. That evening, he texted me a picture of Dad's prescription bag on the kitchen counter beside the index card. Under it, he wrote, "Heroic task complete." I responded with a gold star emoji. Then, because boundaries were still new and guilt was not, I called Dad to make sure he had the right dosage. Dad answered on the second ring. "Your brother handled it." I heard. "Good kid." I waited for him to add something. He didn't. I'm the one who told him how. Well, he still had to drive over here. The absurdity was so clean I almost admired it. "Good night, Dad." "Hey," he said before I hung up. "When are you bringing your car by?" "What?" "Your left blinker's going fast, means a bulb's out." I looked through my apartment window at the parking lot. "How do you know that?" "I heard it Sunday." "You heard my turn signal from inside the house?" I have ears. Dad had spent 37 years maintaining equipment at a packaging plant. He could detect a failing motor by the pitch of its vibration, but had once called me because he could not find the search bar on a website. "Saturday," he said. "Come by around 10. I'll change the bulb. I can do it. I know you can do it. I can do it faster." When I arrived Saturday, he replaced both rear bulbs, changed my oil, and refused the cash I placed on his workbench. "Buy yourself lunch," he said. "I have money for lunch." "Then buy a better lunch." He did not ask how class was going. I did not force him. Instead, I held the flashlight while he checked a belt under the hood, and he complained about manufacturers making engines impossible to reach. It was pleasant. That was the confusing part. My father could make me feel cared for as long as the care did not require him to respect a choice he hadn't made. By the end of my first year, I had learned to read academic articles while eating, while waiting for laundry, and once while standing in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles. My classmates and I traded complaints about tuition and instructors. Dr. Patel covered my paper in comments so small they looked like insect tracks, then wrote, "There is a thesis here," across the last page. I carried that paper in my bag for a week. My parents never saw it. Evan did. He came to my apartment one night with takeout after Paige ended their relationship. She had told him she was tired of being included in decisions only after he'd made them. "I don't even know what that means," he said, opening cartons on my coffee table. "I suspect that's part of the problem." He looked exhausted, genuinely hurt, and younger than 31. I let him talk until the food went cold. On his way out, he noticed Dr. Patel's comment on the paper. "There is a thesis here," he read. "Look at you. It's only a proposal. Still." He smiled. "I'm proud of you." For one stupid second, that was enough. Then he handed me an envelope from Fairmont State. "My acceptance came," he said. I hugged him before I remembered to ask how he planned to pay for it. He pulled back, suddenly unable to meet my eyes. "Mom and Dad want to talk about that Sunday." "What exactly does 'talk about that' mean?" I asked. Evan folded the top of the takeout bag with unnecessary care. They offered to help. "How much?" "I don't know all the details. You know enough to look guilty." "I don't look guilty." "You're folding garbage." He dropped the bag. "Can we not do this tonight? You brought it up, because I didn't want you hearing it from them." "Hearing what?" He glanced toward the paper in my hand, the one with Dr. Patel's note across the bottom, then back at me. "They want to cover tuition." "All of it. I learned Sunday." Mom had set the dining room table with the good plates, the white ones with the silver edge that couldn't go in the dishwasher. A bottle of champagne sat in a bucket beside Evan's chair. My acceptance had been acknowledged with roast chicken and a conversation about mortgage payments. His came with chilled glassware. Dad waited until we were seated before making the announcement, although everyone at the table already knew. "Your mother and I have been looking at the numbers," he said. "We think the best thing is for Evan to go full-time." Evan stared at his water glass. Mom smiled at him. Dad continued, "We'll handle tuition, and we can give him enough each month to cover rent and groceries." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "How much is the program?" I asked. Mom's smile flickered. "We're not discussing personal finances at dinner. You just announced that you're paying his personal finances." "It's an investment," Dad said. "He'll make it back." I set down my fork. "He'll make what back?" "It's your money." "You know what I mean." "No." "Explain it." Evan gave me a quiet warning. "Lena." I looked at him. "You knew they were paying your rent too," they offered. "You're 31. Dad leaned back. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Apparently nothing." Mom placed her napkin beside her plate. "We knew you would take this badly." That sentence landed harder than the money. They had discussed my reaction. They had pictured me at this table, understood exactly what the difference would look like, and decided my pain was an attitude problem waiting to happen. "I'm not taking it badly," I said. "I'm asking why his degree is an investment and mine was a joke. We never called your degree a joke. You laughed when I said it would change what I know." Dad frowned, searching his memory and finding nothing useful. "I don't remember that." "I do." "Your situations are completely different," Mom said. "You were already settled when you went back. I was 2 years younger than Evan is now." "That's not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" She looked to Dad for help. He said, "His program is full-time. It doesn't have to be. The full-time track gives him the best chance to advance quickly. And I don't deserve the best chance? Don't put words in my mouth. I'm trying to get some words out of your mouth. So far, all I have is different." Evan pushed his chair back slightly. "I can do part-time." Mom turned to him in alarm. No, it was immediate, pure instinct. When she faced me again, her voice softened. "Your brother has finally figured out what direction he wants his life to go. We're not going to make him struggle just to prove a point." I felt something in my face go still. What point would that prove? No one answered. The champagne remained unopened until dessert. Mom had bought a chocolate cake with congratulations, Evan written in blue icing. She cut me the piece with the sugar rose because I'd always liked those, and I hated that I still ate it. Afterward, I carried dishes into the kitchen while Dad showed Evan a spreadsheet of estimated expenses. Mom followed me with the serving platter. "You could at least be happy for him," she said. "I am happy for him. You have a strange way of showing it. You're asking me to celebrate the fact that you're giving him something you mocked me for needing. You didn't need it. I asked if you could help with one semester. You said you could manage, after you said no." Mom began scraping plates into the trash. "We didn't have the same flexibility then. It was 18 months ago. Things change." "What changed?" She scraped harder. The fork squealed against porcelain. "Your father got a better return on some investments." She said it too quickly. It might even have been partly true, but we both knew 18 months had not transformed them from worried retirees into people who could casually cover tuition and rent. I lowered my voice. "If you wanted to help him because he's Evan, you could just say that." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you always find a reason he needs more. He does need more." The honesty of it surprised both of us. Mom looked down at the plate in her hands. "You've always been capable. So capable people don't get supported. You don't make it easy, Lena." I laughed softly. I literally asked. She put the plate in the sink and walked out. Evan was waiting beside my car when I left. He had his hands in his pockets and his shoulders drawn up against the cool air. "I didn't ask them to pay," he said, "but you said yes." What was I supposed to do? I unlocked the driver's door. "You're allowed to make your own decisions." That sounds like something people say right before judging your decision. I'm not judging you for accepting help. I'm judging all three of you for pretending there's a philosophical reason I didn't deserve any. He rubbed his nose. "I told them they should help you too." "What did they say?" "That you wouldn't take it." I stared at him. "And you believe that?" "No." But by then, Dad was talking about withdrawing from some account, and Mom was crying. And Mom cried, happy crying. Of course. He leaned against the roof of my car. "If I refuse now, it'll become a whole thing. Dad will think I don't believe in myself. Mom will think you made me feel guilty. Nobody wins. You win. You get a free degree." His face tightened. "That's not fair." "No, it isn't." I got into my car, but he kept one hand on the roof. "I am proud of you," he said. I looked through the windshield. I wish that felt like enough. His hand slid away. For a while, we were careful around each other. Evan stopped sending me papers, and I stopped asking about his classes. Mom provided updates anyway. Evan loved his health economics professor. Evan had been chosen to lead a team project. Evan found the statistics course challenging, but challenging in a good way, not in a way that suggested the tuition had been misplaced. She never asked what I was studying without attaching a request. "How is your research class?" she would say. "Also, your aunt needs help with an online form." Or, "Are you still doing interviews? Your father's phone keeps asking him about cloud storage." My own research was becoming less theoretical every week. Dr. Patel had approved my proposal with the condition that I stop assuming I knew what my participants would say. "If you only hear your own experience," she told me, "you are writing a diary with citations. That sounds marketable. It does not." She looked over her glasses at me. I stopped smiling. My interviews included men caring for partners, women supporting friends, and one retired accountant named George who coordinated appointments for an older cousin who had once fired him from a landscaping job. George disliked his cousin but refused to let him attend medical appointments alone. "He lies to doctors," George explained. "Tells them he walks 3 miles a day. Does he? He owns a pedometer. That's as close as he gets. Not everyone felt trapped. Some people found purpose in being needed. Others enjoyed the control more than they admitted. One woman had arranged every part of her sister's life so thoroughly that her sister no longer knew how to order her own medication. The pattern wasn't simple. That made it better research and a less satisfying personal grievance. I started calling the role the default coordinator, the person everyone trusted, blamed, and contacted first, the person whose competence became an excuse not to ask whether they were tired. When I explained it to Evan, we were sitting in a coffee shop near campus. He had texted asking if I wanted to meet between classes, a peace offering disguised as convenience. That happens at St. Vincent constantly, he said. A patient lists one person as the emergency contact, but someone else is doing everything. Exactly. We've had discharge instructions given to relatives who don't even live in the same state. I leaned forward. How do staff figure out who's actually handling things? They ask whoever's in the room, what if that's not the person? He shrugged. Then we find out when something goes wrong. I pulled my notebook from my bag. Evan smiled. Did I just become research? You said one useful thing. Don't get excited. We talked for 40 minutes. He described nurses writing unofficial notes in charts because the formal contact information was often useless. He was thoughtful and observant. That was another difficult thing about my brother. He was not stupid. He was not lazy all the time. When he paid attention, he saw people clearly. Then he glanced at the clock and swore. I have to submit a discussion post by 6, so go. I wrote it. I just hate the ending. No, I didn't ask anything. You made the face. What face? The one Mom says I have when I decide everyone is against me. He grinned and slid his laptop across the table. I should have slid it back. Instead, I read the ending. By spring, I knew more about his coursework than either of our parents did. He called me after difficult exams. I listened to practice presentations while grocery shopping. When I earned the highest grade in Dr. Patel's seminar, Mom said, "That's nice," then asked whether Evan had told me he made the dean's list. For Dad's birthday, I reserved a private room at his favorite Italian restaurant, confirmed the menu twice, collected money for the gift, and picked up Mom because she didn't want to drive after dark. Evan arrived 25 minutes late carrying an expensive watch. Dad put it on immediately. The leather photo album I had spent 3 weekends assembling stayed wrapped near the empty bread basket until Mom reminded him. "Lena made this," she said. Dad opened it and went quiet. I had found photographs from his years at the plant, including one of him standing beside the first machine he had ever supervised. On the last page, I'd put a picture of us in his garage, my head under the hood while he held the flashlight. "This is something," he said. His voice had changed. For one warm, dangerous moment, I felt seen. Then Mom touched the watch on his wrist and said, "Evan, tell him how much you saved with your student discount." Everyone laughed, including me. Months later, when Dr. Patel approved my thesis title, I made the mistake of sharing it at Thanksgiving. "The default daughter," Mom repeated. "It's about invisible care coordination in families." Dad looked at Evan. "Good news. You're not the default daughter." Evan snorted into his wine. Mom did not laugh. "Is this about us? It's based on 46 interviews. That's not what I asked. It's not about you." She studied my face, deciding whether to believe me. Dad reached for another dinner roll. "Sounds like a complaint scrapbook." Evan said, "Actually, the framework could be useful." Mom brightened. "See? Maybe he can help you make it practical." I looked at my brother. To his credit, he looked embarrassed. Not embarrassed enough to say anything, but enough to look away. After dinner, Evan found me in the laundry room where I was pretending to search for foil. Mom kept extra rolls on a shelf above the washer, along with light bulbs, batteries, and enough stain remover to respond to an industrial accident. I already had the foil in my hand when Evan came in and closed the door behind him. "I wasn't trying to take over your thesis," he said. "You didn't say anything." What was I supposed to say? "You could have told Mom I don't need you to make my work practical." He leaned against the dryer. "I think it already is practical. Then you could have said that. You know how she gets." "Yes, I do. That's why silence is so useful to her." He looked down and picked at the label on a bottle of detergent. "I'm sorry," he said. It was quiet and unpolished. Evan's best apologies usually were. The trouble was that they happened in rooms with the door closed. "Thank you, I'd like to read it when you're done." "You don't have to." "I know." That answer loosened something in me. He reached for the foil. Is that the right one? It's foil, Evan, Mom said, heavy duty. I held up the box. Do you think I came in here and got emotionally trapped with the wrong foil? You've made mistakes before. I shoved the box into his chest and opened the door. Mom was standing in the hallway. She looked from me to Evan. What were you two doing? Discussing aluminum, I said. She watched me carry the foil toward the kitchen. You're so strange when you're mad. My thesis took over the apartment one surface at a time. Interview transcripts covered the dining table. Articles accumulated on the arm of my couch. I taped index cards to the wall until the living room looked like I was investigating a criminal organization run by tired women with pill organizers. The interviews kept resisting the neat argument I had expected to make. Competence mattered, but so did geography, work schedules, money, and old family roles no one remembered choosing. The relative who lived closest became the driver. The one who sounded calm became the contact. The person who helped once was asked again because asking them was easier than negotiating with someone new. Darlene agreed to speak with me formally after Curtis's treatment schedule stabilized. You're going to change my name, right? She asked. Yes. Give me a glamorous one. What counts as glamorous? Not Darlene. I smiled. Noted. She sat in my office after hours with her spiral notebook on her lap. The cover had become soft at the corners. When I asked how her family decided she would coordinate Curtis's care, she laughed. Decided? Maybe that's the wrong word. There was no meeting. Nobody took a vote. He called me from the doctor's office, and then everybody kept calling. Did you ever ask his sons to do more? Oh, sure. What happened? They said, anything you need. I waited. That's not help, she said. That's another decision I have to make, another list I have to create. Then I have to remind them, and if they don't do it, I have to fix it. She tapped her notebook with one finger. The worst part is they think I'm good at this, like that makes it free. I wrote the sentence down, then stopped. Sorry, I said. Would you mind repeating that? Darlene looked at me closely. You know exactly what I mean, don't you? I looked at the recorder between us. I'm not supposed to make the interview about me. Fine. We'll talk after you turn that thing off. The model emerged from conversations like that. Hospitals usually asked who the legal decision maker was and who should be called in an emergency. Those were important questions, but they did not identify who was filling prescriptions, arranging rides, tracking symptoms, or absorbing every last-minute change. I created a second set of questions. Who is handling appointments? Who is available during the day? Who else can perform these tasks? What support does the coordinator need? Dr. Patel read my first draft and drew a box around the final question. This is where your work is, she said. I thought the whole thing was my work. This is where it becomes more than description. You are asking the system to notice the cost. She sat back in her chair. Books leaned in unstable stacks behind her, and a dying plant had dropped 3 brown leaves onto her windowsill. You must be careful, she continued. Institutions like identifying free labor. They are less enthusiastic about supporting it, so I shouldn't make it easier for hospitals to find the most responsible daughter and call her more often. That would be a very efficient way to make the problem worse. I added an opt-in question and a process for distributing tasks instead of assigning them all to one person. The language took weeks. Every word had to separate support from expectation. At the same time, my family gave me fresh material I could not ethically cite. Dad needed outpatient surgery on his shoulder after years of insisting pain was something other people encouraged by discussing. The procedure was routine. According to Mom, this meant there was no reason to worry and every reason for me to be involved in 17 separate conversations. She called me first from the parking lot after the surgical consult. They want someone with him for 24 hours. You'll be there. I know, but what if he needs to get up? Help him. He's heavier than I am. He's having shoulder surgery, not losing the use of his legs. You don't have to be sarcastic. I heard Dad in the background say, "Ask her about the ice machine." "What ice machine?" He says they want us to rent one. The surgeon's office had given them 6 pages of instructions. Mom took pictures of each page and texted them to me individually, including one photo that was mostly her thumb. I called the rental company, I checked their insurance coverage, I made a schedule for the medication because Mom said the abbreviations were confusing, although they were the same abbreviations she had correctly used while caring for her own mother years earlier. Evan had a finance exam the morning of the surgery. "I can skip it," he offered. Mom reacted as if he had proposed dropping out of school to join the circus. "Absolutely not. Lena has flexibility. I did not have flexibility. I had a supervisor named Celia who had already approved 2 afternoons off for thesis interviews and looked tired when I requested another. Still, I drove my parents to the surgical center at 5:30 in the morning. Dad was irritable because he couldn't have coffee. Mom had packed him a turkey sandwich for after the procedure, despite being told the center would provide food. "You put mustard on it?" he asked. "No," she said. "Good. I brought packets. Why? In case you want it." "I won't. You don't know that. I haven't wanted mustard since 1987. I sat in the front seat listening to them argue about a condiment neither of them was currently allowed to eat, and I laughed so suddenly I had to cover it with a cough. Dad caught my eye in the mirror. "What's funny?" "Nothing." "She's overtired," Mom said. At the center, Dad handed me his wallet and wedding ring before they took him back. "Don't lose those." "I was planning to pawn the ring." "You won't get much. Your mother picked it." Mom slapped his good arm. Dad winked at me. That was us too. After the procedure, I drove them home, filled the ice machine, set alarms on Mom's phone, and placed Dad's pills in labeled cups. He was pale and unsteady, his usual impatience blurred by anesthesia. As I pulled a blanket over him, he caught my wrist with his good hand. "You always show up," he said. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Get some sleep," I told him. Evan arrived that evening with cannoli from Dad's favorite bakery. Mom sent me a picture of the box and wrote, "Your brother saved the day." Dad was tired of crackers. I stared at the message until the words became shapes. Then Evan texted separately, "How's Dad?" Mom's version makes no sense. I called him and explained the medication schedule, the ice machine, and the signs that would require a call to the doctor. He listened carefully and asked good questions. "I can stay tonight," he said. "Mom's there. She's exhausted. So am I." Silence. Then he said, "Right. Sorry." He stayed. The next morning, he sent me a photograph of Dad asleep in the recliner, his good hand resting on the empty cannoli box. "Your patient remains difficult," Evan wrote. I almost corrected him. "Our patient." Instead, I wrote, "Thanks for staying." For the next few weeks, Evan took Dad to physical therapy on Mondays because his class schedule allowed it. He complained less than I expected. Dad began calling him my chauffeur with obvious pleasure. At Sunday dinner, Dad told me, "Your brother's been a big help." "I know. You made a good schedule. Thank you." Evan looked at me across the table. It was a tiny thing, but he said, "She did more than make the schedule." Dad blinked. "I know that." Mom began clearing plates. Nobody said she didn't. The conversation ended there, but Evan had said it in the room with the door open. I remembered. That was the problem with him. He gave me just enough proof that he could be different. As my defense approached, my life narrowed to work, revisions, and the vending machine outside the graduate library. I practiced my presentation in my apartment until I could explain the model without looking at my notes. Evan listened once over the phone while driving home from campus. "You spend too long on the literature review," he said. "The intake questions are the interesting part. That's what Dr. Patel said. I'm clearly ready to advise graduate research. You haven't picked a capstone topic. There's time." "There was time 3 months ago." He groaned. "My first proposal got rejected." "The patient flow project? Too broad. Apparently I'm supposed to solve one problem, not healthcare. Your Steve Jobs instincts are showing. You promised never to mention that again." I promised nothing. He wished me luck the morning of my defense. Mom sent a thumbs up emoji. Dad called while I was walking into the building and asked whether a defense meant someone was arguing against me. Not exactly. Then what are you defending? My ability to do research. Seems a little dramatic. I have to go, Dad. You'll do fine, he said quickly. You always do. I passed with minor revisions. Dr. Patel hugged me, which shocked me more than passing. Celia brought grocery store cupcakes to Harbor House, and Darlene appeared at the end of the day holding a bouquet wrapped in crackling plastic. "Did you give me a glamorous name?" she asked. "Extremely." When I called Mom, she screamed loudly enough that Dad took the phone away from her. "Congratulations, kiddo," he said. "So that's it? Once I submit the final revisions, and then they send you the diploma?" "Eventually." Mom took the phone back. "Email me the finished paper." "Why?" There was a brief pause, just long enough to make the answer feel prepared. "Your father wants to have it printed and bound for you." In the background, Dad said, "I do?" Mom shushed him. I laughed. "You're terrible at surprises." "Well, now it's ruined. Send it anyway." No one in my family had asked to read the completed thesis. No one had even remembered the date of my defense without a reminder. The request felt like a hand extended across all the old jokes. That night, after fixing 2 citations and correcting a page number in the table of contents, I attached the final PDF to an email. For the subject line, I wrote, "The default daughter final." Then I sent it to my mother. Mom replied 3 minutes later. "Got it, so proud of you." Dad says, "Use navy for the cover." Dad had apparently developed strong opinions about bookbinding in the time since our phone call. For the next week, Mom asked questions that made me believe she was actually looking through the thesis. "Why are some pages numbered with little Roman numerals?" "Because the formatting guide requires it." "Why?" "To make students suffer." She accepted that. Another night, she called to ask where the useful questions were. Appendix C. I'm looking at Chapter 3. The appendix is at the end. Why would they put the useful part at the end? I put it there. Well, that was silly. I smiled after we hung up. Her interest was clumsy and slightly insulting, but it was interest. I imagined her scrolling through the pages at the kitchen table, pausing over my name on the title page. The bound copy never appeared. Mom said the print shop was backed up because of graduation season. Then she said there had been a problem with the margins. Later, she seemed surprised when I asked about it. "I thought your father picked that up." Dad looked over from his recliner. "Picked what up?" "The surprise you ruined," I said. Mom snapped her fingers. "The thesis." "Right. I'll call them." I told her not to worry about it. She looked offended. "Of course I'm going to worry about it. We said we would do it." Promises in my family had a strange shelf life. If you reminded people too soon, you were demanding. If you waited too long, the promise expired. My graduation ceremony was on a windy Saturday morning. The university held it outdoors, and everyone's cap tried to escape at least once. Mom wore a blue dress and cried before I even crossed the stage. Dad took 43 pictures, 39 of which contained part of his thumb. When I found them afterward, he hugged me hard enough to press the edge of my diploma cover into my ribs. "Master Mercer," he said. "That sounds like I own a ship. Can you make us call you that now?" "Yes. Legally." Mom pushed between us and adjusted my hood for the 10th time. "You looked so serious walking across. I was trying not to fall. I told your father you wouldn't." Dad nodded. "Your mother said if anybody fell, it'd be the man in front of you. He had loose shoes," she said. They had brought me roses, and Mom had posted a photograph online with a caption about how proud they were of our brilliant daughter. The comments filled with people congratulating my parents. Evan missed the ceremony. His capstone advisor had scheduled a mandatory rehearsal for the same morning. He sent me a long text apologizing and promised to make it to dinner. He arrived nearly an hour late, looking as if he had slept in his clothes despite wearing a clean shirt. Mom stood when he came into the restaurant. "There he is," she said, with more relief than she had shown when my name was called. Evan kissed her cheek, shook Dad's hand, and hugged me. "I'm sorry. You said that. I mean it in person now. That adds value." He gave me a small box. Inside was a silver pen engraved with L. Mercer, M.A. "You hate it," he said. "I don't." "You made the face." "What face?" "The one where you're deciding whether something is too sentimental to admit you like." I closed the box. "It's very fancy. See?" I hugged him again, this time without making him start it. During dinner, he barely ate. Every few minutes, he checked his phone under the table. Dad finally told him to put it away. I'm waiting for feedback from Professor Klein. "On a Saturday?" Mom asked. "He said he'd send notes after rehearsal." Dad cut into his steak. "How'd the rehearsal go?" "Fine." "Just fine?" Evan's jaw moved. I knew that look. He was trying to decide which version of the truth the room could tolerate. "My topic changed," he said. I turned toward him. "Again?" "It's settled now." "What is it?" Dad asked. "It's about hospital intake and family communication. Something in the phrasing caught my attention." "What kind of family communication?" I asked. Evan reached for his water, identifying the right contact person, reducing discharge confusion. "That kind of thing? That's close to my research." "I know." The table went quiet for half a beat. Then he smiled. Apparently genius runs in the family. Dad laughed. Mom picked up her wine. "How close?" I asked. Evan looked at me. "Not close. Same broad area. Did you use anything I sent you?" "You never sent me anything." That was true. His expression hardened, not with anger exactly, more like injury. "I work in a hospital, Lena. I'm allowed to notice problems there. I didn't say you weren't. It sounded like you did." Mom touched his arm. "Nobody's accusing you of anything." I asked one question. "At your own graduation dinner," Mom said. "It's his topic, and today is your day, so enjoy it." She smiled too brightly and lifted her glass. To Lena. Everyone raised a glass. I did too, because refusing would have made me the person ruining my own celebration. Later, outside the restaurant, Evan caught up with me while our parents waited for their car. "You really think I'd steal your work?" "I didn't use that word." "You thought it. You said the topic changed." I asked what you were doing. "I've heard you talk about the thesis for 2 years. Of course, some of the language overlaps. My roses rustled in the wind between us." "What's your actual research?" I asked. "It's a capstone, not a thesis. I'm applying existing ideas to an administrative problem." "Whose existing ideas?" He looked past me toward the curb. "I knew this would happen." "What would happen?" "You decide the entire subject belongs to you." I stared at him. He rubbed the side of his nose and let out a breath. "Forget it. I'm stressed. So am I." "I know. I'm sorry." Dad called for us from the car. Evan opened my passenger door and moved the roses off the seat so they wouldn't get crushed. "I am happy for you," he said, "even if I'm terrible at showing it." Then he closed the door for me. That conversation sat uneasily in my mind for a few days, but there were reasonable explanations. Our fields overlapped. We had discussed hospital contact systems in the coffee shop. Evan worked inside the problem I had researched from the outside. Similar questions did not automatically mean theft. More than that, I did not want to believe he would do it. Mom called the following Tuesday to invite me to his presentation. "He wants you there," she said. "Did he say that?" "He doesn't have to say everything directly." "That's convenient. It's a very big deal. Representatives from the Wayland Hospital Network are coming. I know how the capstone showcase works. Well, your father and I don't, so you can explain it to us." The event was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I had a staff meeting at Harbor House and a backlog of reports after taking time off for graduation. "I'll try, don't try, put it on your calendar." "Mom." "He came to your dinner." "An hour late. He had a rehearsal for this." "Which is why he missed my ceremony. He couldn't control that." "But I can control my staff meeting." She sighed. "You know he gets nervous presenting." "He does not." "He called me twice last night." That surprised me. Evan called me when he was nervous. At least, he used to. "What did he say?" "That Professor Klein keeps asking for more support and that his slides aren't working." "Did he ask you to fix them?" "Don't be snide." It wasn't an answer. I moved the staff meeting. On Thursday, I arrived at Fairmont's Health Sciences building 15 minutes before the showcase. Mom had saved me a seat between herself and Dad in the third row. She wore the same blue dress she had worn to my graduation. "You came," she said, as if I had a history of abandoning them. Dad handed me a folded program. Evan's name was listed fourth. "You understand any of these titles?" he asked. "Some." He pointed to one about supply chain resilience. "That one sounds made up. They're all made up. That's how titles happen." Mom frowned. "Be nice." Evan stood near the side of the stage, speaking with Professor Klein. He wore the navy suit Mom had bought him and the tie I had given him 2 Christmases earlier. When he saw us, he smiled. His eyes moved from Mom to Dad to me. For a second, the smile disappeared. Then Professor Klein touched his elbow and Evan turned away. I should have paid more attention to that. The first 3 presentations were competent and forgettable. A woman beside us typed notes on a tablet. 2 representatives from Wayland sat in the front row with silver name badges clipped to their jackets. When Evan's name was announced, Mom gripped my hand. He walked to the lectern, adjusted the microphone, and began without notes. "My work at St. Vincent showed me that healthcare systems often identify the wrong family member as the primary point of contact," he said. "That mistake creates delays, duplicated communication, and preventable strain on staff." I stopped breathing normally. The opening slide was general enough. The second showed hospital communication failures. The third introduced the difference between a legal decision-maker and an active care coordinator. My mother's fingers tightened around mine. "That's your thing," Dad whispered. Before I could answer, Evan advanced to the next slide. 3 blue circles appeared in the center of the screen. The colors were slightly brighter than mine, and the title had been changed, but one of the gold arrows still sat a few pixels too low. I had spent 20 minutes trying to align it before deciding no one would notice. I noticed. Evan kept talking. He moved through my findings with polished confidence. He described patterns from interviews he had not conducted. He used a chart built from my coded data and called it field-based analysis. The words blurred around the edges of my vision. Mom released my hand and leaned toward Dad. "He was up until 2 fixing those slides," she whispered. On stage, Evan clicked to a shortened version of my intake questions. Dad looked at me and murmured, "Now this is useful." I turned toward him. His face held pride, not surprise. That was when I understood Evan wasn't the only person in the room who knew where the work had come from. I stayed seated through the applause. Professor Klein invited questions, and one of the Wayland representatives asked about implementation cost. Evan answered smoothly. A faculty member asked how he would measure reduced staff burden. His answer was thinner, but acceptable. Then Professor Klein looked across the room. One final question. My hand rose. Evan saw it. For the first time all afternoon, my brother looked afraid. Professor Klein pointed toward me. "Yes," in the third row. I stood because remaining seated felt impossible. The folded program slipped from my lap and landed under Dad's chair. My mouth was dry. "You distinguish between the family spokesperson and the person doing the actual coordination," I said. "Why is that distinction important?" Evan's hand tightened around the presentation remote. "It helps the hospital identify the most efficient communication pathway." That was not the answer. I waited. He glanced at Professor Klein, then continued. "In a complex care environment, reducing the number of communication points can minimize delays and improve accountability." Those were polished words. They meant almost the opposite of what I had found. My model did not identify the most efficient person so hospitals could funnel more work toward them. It identified the person already carrying the burden, so the system could stop treating their labor as an unlimited resource. And what prevents the hospital from simply assigning more tasks to that person? I asked. Professor Klein leaned forward. Evan's lips parted, but no answer came. I could have let him struggle. Part of me wanted to watch the silence lengthen until everyone in the room saw what I saw. Instead, my own work pulled the answer out of me. The distinction matters because the visible spokesperson is often not the coordinator, I said. And the coordinator may have accepted individual tasks without consenting to become responsible for the entire care process. That's why the intake includes an opt-in question and requires staff to identify at least one additional source of support. Otherwise, the system isn't reducing burden, it's locating free labor. The woman with the tablet stopped typing. Evan looked at me from the stage. I had seen him scared before, after Paige left before exams, in the surgical waiting room when Dad took longer than expected. This was different. Professor Klein looked between us. "Would you identify yourself for the panel?" he asked. "My name is Lena Mercer. I completed my master's here this semester." I heard Mom whisper, "Don't." I kept my eyes on Evan. The model in this presentation was developed for my thesis, The Default Daughter. It's based on 46 interviews I conducted over 18 months. The diagram on slide 4 and the intake questions in the appendix are mine. No one moved. Then one of the Wayland representatives turned toward Professor Klein. Was this presented as a collaborative project? Professor Klein's expression changed so slightly that someone who did not make a living reading Uncomfortable Rooms might have missed it. "No," he said. Evan lowered the remote. "Professor, I can explain." Professor Klein walked to the lectern. "We're going to conclude the public session here. Thank you to our guests." The applause that followed was thin and confused. People looked at their programs, their phones, one another, anywhere but at my family. Mom stayed in her chair. Dad bent to retrieve the program I had dropped. "You couldn't wait?" he asked quietly. "For what?" "To talk to him privately. He presented it publicly. Keep your voice down." The room was emptying around us. A man who had sat in the row behind touched my shoulder as he passed. "Powerful research," he said. I couldn't tell whether he meant it or simply felt someone should say something kind. Professor Klein spoke to Evan near the stage. Evan nodded rapidly, his face colorless. The Wayland representatives left without approaching him. Mom stood and grabbed her purse. "I hope you're happy." I looked at her. "Did you send it to him? This is not the place." "Did you?" She walked toward the side exit. Dad folded the program in half. "Let's get outside." That sentence had ended every family argument that occurred in public for as long as I could remember. It did not mean the argument would be calmer outside. It meant strangers would not be able to hear it. I waited near the auditorium doors while Evan spoke with his professor. Mom kept checking the time as if we were late for something. Dad paced between a trash can and a bulletin board advertising flu shots. "What exactly happened?" he asked me. "You saw what happened." "I saw part of it." "You saw my thesis." "I've never read your thesis." "Apparently everyone else has." Mom crossed her arms. "That's enough." "Why did you send it to him?" I said outside. "We are outside the auditorium." "You know what I mean." Evan finally emerged carrying his laptop bag. Professor Klein followed him to the door but stopped when he saw us. "I'll email you this evening," he told Evan. "Do not submit any additional materials until you hear from me." "Okay. And preserve every version of the presentation and your capstone draft." Dad stepped forward. "Is that really necessary?" Professor Klein looked at him. "Yes, it was a family misunderstanding. That is not something I can evaluate in a hallway. I'm just telling you his sister knew he was working in the same area." I felt something cold move through me. Professor Klein turned to me. "Ms. Mercer, I will need to speak with you as well. May I contact you through your university email?" "Yes." Mom made a sharp sound through her nose. Professor Klein nodded once and left. Evan stared at the floor. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "Nothing yet." "Then tell me. Can we go somewhere else?" "No." People were still moving through the lobby. The next group of presenters had begun gathering near the auditorium, holding poster tubes and paper coffee cups. Evan looked at them, then at me. "I used your framework. You used my data. I adapted it. You copied my diagram. I redrew it. The arrow was still crooked. His face tightened. Mom stepped between us. "We are not doing this here." She marched toward the building's main entrance, and the rest of us followed, because even at 34, I could still be directed by my mother's angry walk. Outside, the afternoon was bright and windy. Mom's blue dress snapped around her legs as we crossed to the parking garage. Evan kept several steps behind us. At the concrete stairwell, I stopped. How did he get the thesis? Mom turned. I forwarded it. There it was. She said it with irritation, as if my insistence on knowing had forced her to confess something too obvious to matter. "You asked me for it. Your father did want to have it bound." Dad frowned. "I said it would be nice. You told me the print shop was having trouble with the margins. I was going to do it. When? Why does that matter now?" I looked at Evan. When did she send it? He shifted his laptop bag higher on his shoulder. "About 6 weeks ago. My graduation dinner had been 3 weeks ago. You stood outside the restaurant and told me I'd decided the whole subject belonged to me. I was panicking. You lied to my face. I said you never sent it to me. You didn't." For a second, none of us spoke. Even Evan seemed to hear how bad that sounded after it was out. Mom stepped in. "I sent it. If you want to be angry with me. I have enough to go around." She told me to look at the intake section, Evan said. My capstone topic had been rejected twice. "Professor Klein said I needed a workable model and I was running out of time. So you submitted mine. I started with the structure. Then I changed the hospital application, the implementation steps, the cost estimates. You called my interviews field-based analysis. I didn't use names." "That's your defense?" "I'm trying to explain. You presented the conclusions as yours." His voice rose. "Because it was a capstone presentation. I couldn't put your name on every slide. You didn't put it on any slide." Dad held up both hands. "All right. He should have given you credit." "Credit?" I said. "He should not have submitted it as his work. He didn't submit your thesis. He used the ideas. He used the model, the data, the questions, and the diagram." "You told us those questions were in the back," Mom said. I stared at her. "When you called me?" "You asked because you were helping him?" "I was trying to understand what part might be useful. You told me Dad was reading it." "I did read some of it," Dad said defensively. "What did it say?" He looked away. Mom tightened her grip on her purse. Evan was stuck. "You had already finished. I thought he could build on what you'd done. Without telling me. You would have said no. Yes. That's exactly why I didn't ask." The simplicity of her reasoning left me almost dizzy. Evan sat on the low concrete wall beside the stairwell entrance. He bent forward, elbows on his knees. "I was going to tell you after," he said. "After what? After the showcase? After Klein approved the final version? I don't know. After it couldn't hurt you." He rubbed both hands over his face. Mom stood over him. "He made a bad decision under pressure. He made 6 weeks of decisions." "And what did you make?" she snapped. "You raised your hand in front of his professors and those hospital people. You knew exactly what that would do. I told the truth. You humiliated your brother. He was standing in front of a screen with my work on it. Then you talk to us. You don't destroy everything your father and I have paid for." There it was again. The investment. Dad's mouth tightened. "Nobody's saying what Evan did was perfect." "Perfect? But your research was sitting in a file. He turned it into something hospital administrators could understand." I looked at him for a long moment. "My work was already being reviewed for publication." "That's not what I mean." "What do you mean?" "He made it presentable. It was a presentation." "You know what your father means," Mom said. "I want him to say it." Dad looked exhausted now, as if my need for exact language was the real cruelty. He took an academic idea and showed how it could work in the real world. That is what my thesis does. "All right, Lena, no, you laughed at it. You called it a complaint scrapbook." Then he changed the title, put on a suit, and suddenly it was useful. Mom's face went flat. "We gave your work to the person who could actually do something with it." The parking garage seemed to absorb the sentence and return it colder. Dad said her name, not to disagree, to warn her that she had said too much. Evan lifted his head. "Mom, that's not—" "Yes, it is," I said. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "That's exactly what all of you think." I walked toward my car. Evan followed me between the rows. "Lena, wait." I kept walking. "Please, I know I screwed up. You don't get to make me comfort you. I'm not asking for comfort. I'm asking you not to make this worse." I turned. He stopped so quickly his laptop bag swung against his hip. "I answered a question," I said. "You made it worse. What am I supposed to tell Klein?" The truth would be new. His face crumpled for half a second before he forced it still. I got into my car and locked the door. By the time I reached home, I had 9 missed calls. 4 were from Mom, 2 were from Dad, 2 were from Evan. The last was from Dr. Patel. I listened to hers first. "Lena, Professor Klein contacted me," she said. Her voice was calm, but not casual. "Do not answer questions from your family about what the university may do. Save every version of your thesis. We need to talk." A text from Mom appeared while I was listening. "Come Sunday. All of us. We are going to fix this." I stared at the word fix until the screen dimmed. Mom did not mean repair. She meant rearrange the facts until the person she loved most stopped facing consequences. I turned off my phone and opened my laptop. My thesis files were stored in 6 different folders because I had never trusted the university's server, my computer, or myself. There were early outlines, coded interview notes, versions with Dr. Patel's comments, and the final PDF I had sent Mom. I copied nothing, changed nothing, and closed the computer. Then I sat on my couch with the engraved pen Evan had given me lying on the coffee table. At 10 the next morning, I met Dr. Patel in her office. The dying plant was gone. In its place sat an empty ceramic pot shaped like a cat. "What happened to the plant?" I asked. "It completed its journey. Did you kill it? This is not why you are here." She pointed to the chair across from her desk. Professor Klein joined us by video. He looked older than he had at the showcase, although only 18 hours had passed. He asked me to describe exactly what I had recognized in Evan's presentation. I listed the diagram, the coded findings, the sequence of intake questions, and several phrases taken directly from my analysis. I explained that I had sent the final thesis to my mother after she said my father wanted it bound. "Did you authorize her to share it with your brother?" he asked. "No." "Did you discuss your model with him?" "Yes. Generally." "How generally?" I told him about the coffee shop conversation and the times Evan had listened to me rehearse ideas. I did not minimize those things. I also did not pretend a conversation about overlapping interests was permission to submit my research under his name. Professor Klein took notes. "Your brother says he believed the model was family intellectual property because it developed partly through conversations with relatives." Dr. Patel became completely still. "Family intellectual property?" I repeated. "That is the phrase he used. Did he say which relatives conducted the interviews?" Professor Klein removed his glasses. "I am not suggesting the argument has merit." "Good. He has also said his mother provided the document and encouraged him to adapt it." "That part is true." Dr. Patel spoke for the first time. "His mother cannot grant permission to use work she does not own." Professor Klein nodded. "I understand. The university would conduct a review. Evan would be allowed to submit drafts, emails, and notes showing how his capstone had developed. I would provide my completed thesis and, if requested, earlier versions." Professor Klein carefully avoided predicting the outcome. I found myself irritated by his calmness, even though I knew it was appropriate. "What happens to the hospital showcase?" I asked. "Wayland has withdrawn its invitation for Evan to discuss the project further. That was the fellowship Mom had already begun talking about as if he had been hired." I looked down at the engraved pen in my hand. I had brought it without realizing. Did I cause that by speaking up? Professor Klein took a moment before answering. No. Mr. Mercer caused it by presenting work he could not substantiate. I nodded, but the guilt did not disappear simply because someone assigned it correctly. When the call ended, Dr. Patel remained behind her desk. "You are going to want to save him," she said. "No, I'm not." She waited. I hated when she did that. "I don't want him expelled," I admitted. "That is not your decision." "I know." "Do you?" I looked at the empty cat-shaped pot. "He's my brother." "Yes." "He did something terrible." "Yes." "He's not a terrible person. That question is above my pay grade." Despite everything, I laughed. Dr. Patel leaned forward. "You do not need to make him monstrous to tell the truth about what he did. Families often demand that. They act as if harm only counts when the person causing it is beyond love." She folded her hands. "You may love him. You may wish him mercy. You may not alter evidence to purchase it." Mom called 14 times between Friday and Sunday. Dad called twice. His messages were brief. "Call your mother. We need to settle this." Evan called once and left no voicemail. I went to my parents' house Sunday because I wanted to hear what all three of them would say after they'd had time to think. Some part of me still believed reflection might produce shame. Mom had made baked ziti. The dish sat on the stove under foil, alongside garlic bread and a salad she had already dressed, even though no one was eating yet. She hugged me when I walked in. Her body felt rigid against mine. "I'm glad you came." Dad sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad in front of him. Evan was beside him, turning a water glass between his hands. The legal pad bothered me. It made the meeting look official, as if Dad had prepared minutes. I stayed standing. "What are we fixing?" Mom closed the kitchen door. "Sit down. I'm fine. For God's sake, Lena, nobody's attacking you, then I should be safe standing." Dad dropped his pen. "Can we please have one conversation without you turning every sentence into a fight?" I pulled out a chair and sat. Mom placed a printed page in front of me. It was a statement addressed to Professor Klein and the Academic Review Committee. According to the statement, Evan and I had discussed our respective projects throughout the academic year. I had voluntarily shared my research framework with him, understood that he intended to adapt it for his capstone, and considered his failure to credit me during the presentation an unfortunate misunderstanding caused by last-minute slide revisions. At the bottom was a blank line for my signature. I read it twice. The second time was not necessary. I was buying myself enough time to keep my voice level. "Who wrote this?" Dad said. "We all worked on it." "All of you?" Evan stopped turning the glass. "Mostly Dad," he said. Mom sat across from me. "It's accurate." "No, it isn't. You did discuss your projects." "Yes, you did share ideas with Evan. I spoke to him. I did not give him my thesis. You gave it to me. For Dad." Dad looked annoyed. "Why do you keep saying it like I was part of some trick? Were you?" "No. Did you know Mom sent it to him?" He glanced at her. "Not when she sent it. When did you know?" "Before the presentation." "How long before?" "Lena, does it matter?" "Yes." He looked at the legal pad. "A week? Maybe 2. And you didn't tell me. I didn't know he was using the whole thing." Evan said, "I didn't use the whole thing." I turned to him. "You used every original part. The implementation budget was mine. Congratulations." His face reddened. Mom pushed the statement closer to me. "Nobody is saying he handled this perfectly. The point is to make clear that this wasn't some stranger stealing your work. You think it's better because he's my brother? I think context matters. Then the context is that my mother lied to get my thesis, sent it to my brother, and my father knew he was using it." "I did not lie," Mom said. "We still intend to have it bound." I looked at her. She believed that helped. Dad rubbed his forehead. "The university is treating this like fraud. It is academic misconduct. You don't have to use their language. It's the correct language. It could cost him his degree." Evan stared at the table. Mom's voice cracked. Do you understand what your father and I have put into this?" There were tears in her eyes, real ones. She had spent years encouraging Evan, protecting him, treating his potential like a family heirloom. She was terrified, and I loved her enough to see that. I was also finally angry enough not to fix it. "You mean the money?" "Nearly $60,000, Dad said. Tuition, rent, books. We did that because we believed in him. You believed in him before he did any work. That's what parents do." The sentence hung between us. Mom heard it too. Her eyes dropped. I touched the edge of the statement. "You didn't do that for me. This is not about your tuition again," Dad said. "It has always been about the same thing. His future is something all of us have to protect. Mine is something I'm supposed to handle quietly. That is not fair. No, it isn't." Evan finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. "If you don't sign, Klein says I may have to repeat the capstone. Then repeat it. I could lose the whole semester. You spent 6 weeks copying work I spent 18 months creating." "I know, no, you know the numbers. I don't think you know what they mean. I know I screwed up. You keep saying that like you sent an email to the wrong person." He flinched. Mom reached for my hand. I moved it before she touched me. "If he admits he made a mistake," she said, "what else do you want?" "Nothing." "Then sign." I said, "I want nothing. Not that I'll give you what you want." Dad leaned back. "It's one signature. It's my name under a lie. It protects the family." "From what?" He looked toward Evan. From him, I realized. We were all being asked to stand between Evan and the truth of what he had done. My parents, with their money. Me with my name. Evan with his guilt. I picked up the statement and handed it back. No, Mom did not take it. "Lena, think carefully. I have. This affects more than you. It affected more than him when he did it." Evan pushed his chair away from the table. "Mom, stop." She turned on him. "You don't get to tell me to stop. You're sitting here because of her." He recoiled. "No," I said. "He's sitting here because of him." Mom's face changed. "If his degree is taken away, I will never forgive you. There are threats that frighten you because you believe them, and threats that free you for the same reason." I stood. Dad pointed toward my chair. "Sit down." "No." "We are not finished." "I am." Mom followed me into the dining room. "You would choose a paper over your own brother?" I stopped beside the buffet. The top drawer was slightly open. Inside, I could see the corner of the index card where I had written Dad's pharmacy password. I pulled it out and placed it on the table between us. "No," I said. Evan chose my paper over me. Then I walked out before anyone could hand me another thing to carry. I made it 2 blocks before I had to pull over. Not because I was crying. I was too angry to cry properly. My hands were shaking so hard the turn signal clicked every time my thumb brushed it. I parked outside a closed dry cleaner and stared at the index card on my passenger seat. I had taken it from the buffet without thinking. Dad's pharmacy username was written on one side, his password on the other, along with a note reminding me which number in the password was his birth month and which was his retirement year. I knew his prescription schedule, his insurance group number, and the name of the nurse who returned calls fastest at his doctor's office. I knew Mom's email password because she had changed one letter in the password she used for everything else. I knew Evan's student identification number. The knowledge sat inside me like a set of keys to rooms I no longer wanted to enter. At home, I opened a blank document and began listing what I managed. The list was embarrassingly long. Dad's pharmacy account, Mom's patient portal, their shared utility login, the auto-renewal date for the roadside assistance plan, the monthly reminder for Dad's blood pressure prescription, the number for the man who cleaned their gutters, Aunt Marcy's insurance contact, the reservation Mom had asked me to make for my parents' anniversary. Half of it had nothing to do with the other half. That was how invisible work survived. Each task was small enough to sound petty when named alone. I emailed the list to Mom, Dad, and Evan. The subject line was family information. I included usernames but not passwords. I told them where the passwords were stored and added instructions for resetting anything they couldn't access. I explained that I was removing myself from their shared accounts and would no longer manage appointments, forms, household services, celebrations, or routine problems. I will respond to a genuine emergency, I wrote. I will not continue being the default person for everything else. Before sending it, I deleted a paragraph explaining why. They knew why. Mom called while I was still at the computer. I let it ring. Then Dad called. Then Evan. My phone kept lighting up beside the engraved pen. I sent the email. Dad replied first. This is childish. Mom's response arrived a minute later. After everything we've done for you. Evan did not reply. On Monday, I removed my email address from Dad's pharmacy account. The website asked if I was sure. I laughed out loud. Celia heard me from the next office. You all right? She called. No. Want coffee? Yes. She appeared in my doorway holding 2 paper cups. Celia was in her late 40s and wore bright earrings that looked as if they had been selected by a more cheerful version of herself. That morning, they were tiny red bicycles. She set 1 cup on my desk. You don't have to tell me anything, she said. That was how she got people to tell her things. My brother presented my thesis as his capstone. She sat down. I gave her the short version. Then the medium version. By the time I reached the Sunday statement, my coffee was cold. Celia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Do you need time off? I've had enough time off. That wasn't the question. If I sit at home, I'll call my mother. So don't sit at home. Take a day and go somewhere she isn't. I don't know where that is. Celia gave me a tired smile. That sounds like a separate problem. I stayed at work. At lunch, I found a voicemail from the university's academic review office requesting copies of my drafts. I sent them the files Dr. Patel and I had already organized. I answered each question with dates and facts. I did not include the funding difference, the graduation dinner, or the sentence Mom had said in the parking garage. We gave your work to the person who could actually do something with it. That sentence belonged to a different review. There was no committee for that one. 3 days later, Dad called my office. I answered because he never called Harbor House unless he believed something was urgent. What happened? I can't get into the pharmacy. Did you use the password on the card? It says it's wrong. Reset it. It keeps sending the code to your email. I remove my email. I know. That's the problem. No, that was the solution. He exhaled into the phone. Your mother needs me to pick up a prescription. Then call the pharmacy. They don't answer. They do eventually. So you expect me to sit on hold? The words were out before he heard them. I stayed quiet. Dad cleared his throat. I just need the reset code. It isn't going to me anymore. I changed the contact to your email. I don't know my email password. Mom does. She says she doesn't. It's written in the blue address book near the computer. A pause. You knew where it was this whole time? Yes. And you're making us hunt for it? It's in your house. You could save everyone a lot of trouble by helping. I am helping. I told you where it is. This attitude is unnecessary. Did you call Evan? He's in class. So am I, in the sense that I'm at my job. You know what I mean. I did. Evan's time was protected. Mine was available until I defended it. Call him after class, I said. Dad hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, Mom sent a picture of the blue address book sitting open on the kitchen table. Found it. Hope proving your point was worth upsetting your father. I typed 3 responses and deleted all of them. Then I turned off my phone and went to the grocery store. I stood in the produce section for 5 full minutes trying to remember what I liked to eat. My usual shopping list was partly built around what I could bring to my parents on Sunday. Dad liked green grapes. Mom preferred mandarins. Evan ate whatever was left in their refrigerator after class. I bought pears. They were terrible. The university completed its review faster than I expected. Professor Klein called late on a Friday afternoon. Evan's capstone had been invalidated. He would not be expelled, but he had to repeat the project under direct supervision using a new topic and original work. He would not graduate that semester. Wayland had formally withdrawn him from consideration for its administrative fellowship. "I'm sorry," I said. Professor Klein sounded surprised. "For what?" "I don't know. The committee's findings are not your responsibility. People kept telling me that as if responsibility listened to evidence. Has he accepted the decision?" "He chose not to appeal." That surprised me. "Did he say why?" "I can't discuss our private conversation." "Right." Professor Klein paused. "For what it's worth, I believe he understands the decision was lenient." After we hung up, I sat in my office until the automatic lights in the hallway shut off. I had imagined the ruling would feel like relief. Instead, I pictured Evan in the Navy suit, looking toward me before his presentation began. He had known I was sitting there. He had clicked to the first stolen slide anyway. My phone rang. Mom. I knew Professor Klein must have called him first. I answered. "You got what you wanted," she said. There was no greeting. Her voice was low and steady. "I didn't ask for this. Don't." I didn't. He can't graduate. He can finish a new capstone in another semester. Yes, do you know what that does to his job prospects? No, of course not. You don't care. I looked through the dark glass of my office window. My reflection looked older than it had at graduation. "I care," I said. "I'm just not lying for him. The fellowship is gone. I know. He worked for 2 years. So did I." She inhaled sharply. "You cannot let that go. You keep making it relevant." "It isn't relevant. You funded his degree because his work mattered. Then when he needed work good enough to finish it, you gave him mine. That is not what happened. It is exactly what happened. He made a mistake. So did you." Silence. My mother could tolerate criticism of her judgment if it remained theoretical. A direct sentence was different. "I was trying to help my son," she said. "You hurt your daughter. You were already finished." I closed my eyes. There it was again. Once I survived something, my family used my survival as proof that it had cost me nothing. "I have to go," I said. "We're supposed to have dinner Sunday. I'm not coming. Your father bought steaks. Freeze mine. Lena, I need space. We are not strangers. Families don't take space every time they disagree. This is not a disagreement. You stood up in a room full of people and humiliated your brother. I sent him something that might help. If anyone deserves space, I ended the call." For 10 minutes, I sat at my desk shaking. Then I called Celia and asked if she wanted to get dinner. She did not say she had plans, though I suspected she had changed them. We ate tacos at a place where the tables were too close together, and the music was loud enough that I did not have to fill every silence. Celia told me about a terrible date she had gone on with a dentist who spent 20 minutes describing gum recession. I laughed until my eyes watered. When I got home, a padded envelope was leaning against my apartment door. Inside was the navy-bound copy of my thesis. The cover was stamped in gold with my name and the title. A small white receipt was tucked between the first 2 pages. The print shop date was 3 days after I had emailed Mom the file. She had lied about the delay. She had picked it up weeks ago. There was no note. I carried the book inside and set it on my dining table. I could not decide whether it was an apology, an accusation, or proof my mother believed an object could complete a promise after the promise had been emptied out. I did not call her. On Sunday, I slept until 9, made coffee, and kept reaching for my phone. At 11, I went to the laundromat even though the machines in my building worked. I sat beneath fluorescent lights and watched other people's clothes turn behind glass. At 1, Dad left a message saying the stakes would be ruined. At 3, Evan texted, "I accepted the decision. I'm doing a new capstone. I'm sorry." I read it several times. Then another message appeared. "Mom is losing it. Can you please just tell her you don't hate us?" My thumb hovered over the screen. Even his apology had arrived carrying a task. I placed the phone face down and watched the dryers spin until they stopped. I answered Evan the next morning. I don't hate you. I'm not managing Mom's feelings about what happened. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. They vanished. Then they came back. Okay. It was the first conversation we had ever ended without me making sure he felt better. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It had edges. Mom stopped calling, but she communicated through other people. Aunt Marcy left me a voicemail saying my mother had been crying for 3 days. A cousin I saw twice a year sent a message about forgiveness being important. Dad mailed me a magazine article about siblings who became estranged after inheritance disputes, although no inheritance was involved, and the article's main lesson seemed to be that everyone should hire a mediator. I put it in the recycling. Aunt Marcy called again. This time I answered. I'm not trying to get in the middle, she said, which is how people announce that they are already standing there. Then don't. Your mother says you won't come to dinner. That's true. She says you've taken yourself off all their accounts. Also true. Marcy hesitated. She said it like you canceled their electricity. I sent them every login and instruction they need. Oh. And Evan lives 40 minutes away. 35 if traffic's good. I smiled despite myself. Exactly. Marcy was quiet for a few seconds. What did he actually do with your paper? She asked. I explained. Mom had told her Evan and I developed similar projects, and I became upset when his received more attention. She had not mentioned forwarding my final thesis. She had not mentioned the statement they wanted me to sign. When I finished, Marcy said, Well, that's lousy. It was such an ordinary judgment that my throat tightened. Yeah. And your mother knew? She sent it. Jesus, Diane. I heard her light a cigarette. Marcy had claimed to quit twice that year. I'm sorry about that shower chair mess, she said. What? After my surgery. I had your mother call you. It was fine. No, it was not fine. I could have handled it. I didn't want to sit on hold, and everybody knows you'll do it if we wait long enough. The directness startled me. You don't have to apologize for everything now. I'm not. I'm apologizing for the chair. I reserve the right to remain selfish in other areas. I laughed. Want me to tell your mother she's wrong? Marcy asked. That might make her worse. Oh, it definitely will. Then no. Fine. But I'm available. For what? I don't know. Isn't that what people say when they want credit without taking on a task? I laughed again, harder. Marcy did not fix anything. She also did not ask me to fix her discomfort. At that point, it felt almost radical. At work, I kept expecting the family crisis to contaminate everything. Instead, Harbor House remained aggressively normal. The copier jammed. Curtis missed an appointment because he wrote the time down wrong and blamed Darlene's handwriting. Celia ordered 6 boxes of brochures with our old phone number and spent an afternoon covering the number with stickers. Then Dr. Patel emailed asking whether I was available for a meeting. She'd submitted an article based on my thesis to a healthcare policy journal with me as the primary author. We'd discussed it before graduation, but I had assumed publication would take months. The reviewers wanted revisions. I opened their comments at my desk and prepared to feel inadequate. Instead, one of them called the intake framework immediately applicable. I read the phrase 5 times. Celia appeared in my doorway wearing green earrings shaped like tiny watering cans. Something wrong? Someone thinks my research is useful. That sounds like something right. I know. I don't trust it. She came around the desk and read the comment over my shoulder. Immediately applicable, she said. Fancy. My dad would like that phrase. Then don't tell him. I turned toward her. Celia shrugged. Not everything has to be offered to people who keep dropping it. The revisions took 3 weeks. Dr. Patel rejected every attempt I made to soften the argument. You are writing as if an angry relative is reading over your shoulder, she said during one video call. That's oddly specific. Is it inaccurate? I deleted a sentence beginning, to be fair. When we resubmitted, Dr. Patel told me a director at Franklin Community Hospital had also read the thesis through the university repository. Franklin served several of the same neighborhoods as Harbor House. They were redesigning their discharge process and wanted to discuss testing my questions in one unit. My questions, I repeated. Your model, Dr. Patel said. The thing you have spent 4 years insisting matters. I know what it is. Do you? The meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon. I wore the blazer I used for grant presentations and carried the navy-bound copy of my thesis in my bag. I had not opened it since Mom left it outside my door. Franklin's director of patient services, Teresa Boone, met us in a conference room overlooking the employee parking garage. She had close-cropped gray hair and a habit of tapping her pen twice before asking a question. Their discharge team had struggled with patients returning because the person given instructions was not the person managing care at home. We call the listed contact, Teresa said. Sometimes that's a spouse who works nights, a brother who lives 6 states away, or a friend who agreed to drive once and suddenly ends up responsible for everything. Identification is only half of it, I said. If staff find the person already doing the work and make them the contact for even more tasks, you increase burnout. Teresa tapped her pen twice. How do you prevent that? I opened my thesis to Appendix C. For the next hour, Dr. Patel barely spoke. No one laughed at the title. No one asked what a sociology degree was for. Teresa challenged the staffing assumptions and said the word burden might alarm hospital counsel. But every objection was aimed at improving the work, not proving it should never have existed. At the end, she asked what compensation I would expect for helping them design a 3-month pilot. I looked at Dr. Patel. She did not rescue me. I named a number. Teresa tapped her pen, then said, "That's reasonable." I had to stop myself from looking behind me to see who she was answering. We left with a list of next steps and a tentative launch date. In the elevator, Dr. Patel said, "You undervalued yourself." They said yes immediately. "That was your first clue. I've never consulted for a hospital. They are not paying for your history of consulting. They are paying because you know something they do not." Outside, the sun reflected off every windshield in the garage. I thought about calling Mom. The impulse was so strong that I took out my phone. I could already hear the conversation. Mom would scream with excitement. Dad would ask how much they were paying. Then one of them would mention that Evan's project had helped people notice the model. I put the phone away. I called Celia instead. Her scream was louder than Mom's would have been. The family managed without me, though they made sure I heard how badly. Dad missed a physical therapy appointment because Mom assumed Evan had confirmed it and Evan assumed Dad had written it down. The clinic charged a fee. Mom sent me a photograph of the bill with no message. I replied, "Evan has the schedule." She did not answer. Their 38th anniversary arrived 2 weeks later. I had made the reservation every year since their 30th. The restaurant Dad liked required bookings at least a month ahead. Mom called the afternoon before. "What time is our reservation?" I didn't make one. Silence. You always make it. I put anniversary planning on the list I sent. I thought that meant next year. Why? Because we were in the middle of everything. So was I. She lowered her voice. "Your father is looking forward to this. Then call the restaurant. They're full. Try somewhere else. He doesn't want somewhere else." I waited. Mom made an exasperated sound. "What am I supposed to tell him? That you both forgot to make a reservation?" "I didn't forget. I thought you had done it. That's the problem." She hung up. Evan found them a table at a seafood restaurant across town. Dad disliked seafood, but the restaurant served steak. Mom posted a photograph of the two of them smiling over a piece of cheesecake with "Happy Anniversary to my favorite person." The next morning, Dad called. We waited 45 minutes for the table. That's unfortunate. And they overcooked the steak. I'm sorry. The other place never overcooks it. You should reserve earlier next year. He was quiet. "You really plan to keep this up forever?" he asked. "Keep what up?" "Punishing us. I didn't prevent you from making a reservation. You knew we were counting on you." "Yes." He did not hear the answer inside that. A week later, Evan emailed me. He had copied Mom and Dad. Attached was a shared calendar containing Dad's appointments, prescription renewals, birthdays, and the gutter cleaning reminder. Each item had an assigned person. Evan's name appeared more often than anyone else's. Under the link, he had written, "I'm taking this over for now. If something is missing, please add it." Dad replied, "Looks complicated." Mom wrote, "I don't know how to add things." I did not respond. 2 hours later, Evan sent me a separate message. "How did you do this without everyone arguing with you?" I typed, "They argued. You just didn't have to hear it." He answered with a single word, "Right." His new capstone was on medication inventory controls. It had nothing to do with families, caregiving, or me. I knew because Mom mentioned it in a voicemail she left, despite our silence. "He's working very hard," she said. "He barely has time for anything else." That evening, Evan drove Dad to a rescheduled physical therapy appointment, picked up Mom's dry cleaning, and reset the password on their utility account. I knew because Dad accidentally sent the thank you text to me. "Good kid. Don't know what we'd do without you." A second message appeared 30 seconds later. "Wrong person." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I put down the phone and returned to the pilot proposal bearing my name. The proposal took me 4 drafts and 2 meetings with Franklin's legal department. The lawyers objected to the phrase default daughter. "It implies gender bias," one of them said. "It describes gender bias," I answered. Teresa Boone pressed her lips together to hide a smile. The lawyer tapped the page. "Could we call it family contact optimization? No. Care partner identification? That identifies the person. It doesn't support them." "What would you suggest? The default coordinator support protocol?" He looked relieved until I added, "Developed from the default daughter framework." Teresa tapped her pen twice. "That works for me." We kept the attribution. I spent Monday afternoons at Franklin observing discharge meetings. The first one lasted 11 minutes. A nurse reviewed medication changes with a man named Bernard and his friend Luis, who had driven him to the hospital. When the nurse asked who would help Bernard at home, Bernard pointed to Luis. Luis sat up. "I'm driving him. I'm not moving in." Bernard laughed as if Luis were joking. He wasn't. Under the old process, Luis would have been listed as the primary family contact because he was present and had a car. Using my questions, the nurse learned Bernard's sister lived in the same apartment building. His neighbor could pick up groceries, and Bernard was fully capable of managing his own medication once the labels were enlarged. The nurse distributed 3 tasks instead of quietly handing all of them to Luis. Afterward, she turned to me in the hallway. That took 6 extra minutes. I know, we don't have 6 extra minutes. How long does it take when the wrong person gets called 4 times and no one picks up? She considered that. "Still," she said, "your form has too many questions." She was right. I hated that. We shortened it. That was what real collaboration looked like, I discovered. Someone could challenge my work without challenging my right to have done it. They could change a question without taking my name off the page. The article was accepted the same week. Dr. Patel emailed at 6:14 in the morning. "Congratulations. Do not make this emotionally complicated." I called her anyway. "I'm trying to decide whether your message is supportive." "It is extremely supportive." I used a period. "You always use periods." "Exactly." The journal would publish the article online before the print issue. Franklin wanted to mention it when the pilot launched. Celia brought cupcakes again, this time from an actual bakery. Darlene came by Harbor House and presented me with a card that said, "Congratulations on doing something with your complaints scrapbook." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. "That phrase traveled farther than I intended," I said. "You told me." I remembered. Inside, she had written, "Thank you for noticing the work." I kept the card in my desk. Aunt Marcy found out about the publication through me, then told my mother despite promising she wouldn't. "I forgot," she said when I confronted her. "You did not. Fine." I decided she should know. "That's not better. It's more honest. Mom left a voicemail that evening. I heard your article was accepted. Your father and I are very proud. It would have been nice to hear it from you, but I suppose Marcy is on the approved list now." She paused long enough for me to imagine her sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me to interrupt. "Congratulations, honey." The last 2 words were soft. I saved the voicemail. I did not call back. Dad's birthday invitation came from Evan through email. The subject line said, "Dinner Saturday, 6 o'clock," and the message included the restaurant address, reservation name, parking instructions, and a note that no one needed to bring anything. I read it twice, looking for the hidden task. There wasn't one. I replied that I would attend. Mom called 10 minutes later. "I knew you wouldn't miss your father's birthday. Evan sent an invitation. He's gone overboard with the details. The parking information was useful. We've eaten there before." "I haven't." She skipped over that. "Are you bringing the album?" "What album?" "The one you made, Dad. He has it." "I know, but I thought maybe you'd bring it so everyone could look through it. Why would I take his gift from his house to a restaurant? You're being literal. I'm asking a question." Mom sighed. "Forget it." That was the first conversation we'd had in nearly 2 months. At the restaurant, Dad stood when I arrived. For a second, we faced each other awkwardly. Then he opened his arms. I hugged him. He smelled like the same aftershave he had worn for 20 years and the peppermint candies he kept in his coat pocket. His hand pressed against the back of my head. "Glad you came," he said. "Happy birthday." Mom hugged me next. She held on a little too long, her cheek against mine. Evan had invited Aunt Marcy and her partner Denise. Paige was not there, of course. Evan had not dated anyone seriously since they broke up. The evening began carefully. We discussed Dad's physical therapy, Marcy's ongoing war with her homeowners association, and Denise's new obsession with baking sourdough. Everyone avoided school, hospitals, and anything containing the word thesis. Dad opened his gifts after dinner. Evan gave him a digital weather station with 3 outdoor sensors. "This thing measures humidity?" Dad asked. "Inside and outside. Why do I need to know the humidity inside? Because if I gave you a normal clock, you'd complain it didn't do enough." Dad grinned. "Good point." I gave him a set of specialized tools he had mentioned wanting in the garage. He ran his thumb across the case. "You remembered?" "Yes." He looked at me, then down at the tools. "I always remember," I said. The sentence came out more sharply than I intended. Mom reached for her water. Dad closed the case. "I know." After dessert, Marcy asked me about Franklin. Before I could answer, Dad said, "They're using her system at the hospital." I turned toward him. He had read none of the proposal. I had told him nothing. Marcy smiled. "That's impressive." "It is," Dad said. "She got an article published, too." Mom looked down at her plate. Pride warmed me before suspicion could stop it. I had wanted this from him for so long that even secondhand information found a place to land. "How did you know about the pilot?" I asked. "Your mother told me." Mom said Marcy sent me the announcement from the journal. The pilot wasn't in the announcement. She hesitated. "Evan told us." I looked at him. He moved his fork through a streak of frosting. Franklin posted about it on their staff page. St. Vincent people shared it. The thought of my work traveling through his workplace tightened the room. Dad did not seem to notice. "I told the guys at the plant reunion my daughter designed a hospital system," he said. "It's an intake protocol." "That's what I said. It's not really a system." Dad frowned. "Do you want me to be proud correctly or not at all?" Marcy covered a cough with her napkin. I smiled despite myself. Correctly would be nice. I'll work on it. Mom's face softened. For a few minutes, the dinner felt almost normal. Then Dad asked Evan about the new capstone. Evan described a medication inventory tracking process that could reduce waste across departments. He had gathered original data from St. Vincent and was building a small simulation. "Professor Klein says it's strong," he said. Mom reached across and squeezed his hand. "He's been working constantly." "I'm glad it's going well," I said. Evan looked at me carefully, checking for sarcasm. "Thank you," Dad said. "Maybe this one will lead to something even better than Wayland." Mom's eyes filled. I still can't believe they dropped him without even hearing his explanation. The fragile normality collapsed so quietly that the people at the next table would not have noticed. Evan pulled his hand away from hers. They heard it. I mean, the full family context. There isn't a family context that makes it okay. Mom stared at him. He kept his eyes on his plate. Dad said, "Tonight isn't the time." "No," Mom agreed. "Tonight is supposed to be pleasant." Her gaze moved to me as if I had changed the subject. I placed my napkin beside my plate. I should go. "Lena," Dad said. I stayed through dessert. "We can discuss one uncomfortable thing without you leaving. Can we?" Nobody answered. Outside, Evan followed me to my car. The restaurant parking lot was damp from an earlier rain, and the overhead lights reflected in the black pavement. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what part?" "Tonight. You didn't do anything tonight. That's sort of the theme, isn't it?" I unlocked my car but did not open the door. He looked exhausted. His shirt had come untucked on one side, and there was a small stain on his tie from Dad's chocolate cake. "Mom keeps trying to prove what I did was understandable," he said. "It's making it harder to understand why I did it. What does that mean?" "I don't know yet, that's honest. I've been handling their stuff. I saw the calendar. Dad's passwords are a nightmare. They're all the same with different numbers. That somehow makes it worse." I smiled. Evan put his hands in his pockets. "They call about everything." "Yes." Mom called me during an exam review because the cable box said no signal. "What did you do?" "Drove over there." "Why?" "She said Dad was getting frustrated." The words hung between us. Evan looked toward the restaurant windows. "I hear it now," he said. "What? All the things they say right before they make the problem yours." I leaned against my car. "You always heard them." "No, I heard words. I thought you were better at helping, so it made sense to ask you." "And now?" "Now I think you got better because nobody let you stop." It was the closest he had come to seeing it. I wanted to reward him. That reflex rose so quickly I almost told him he was doing a great job, that the calendar looked good, that I was proud of him for taking Dad to therapy. I kept those words inside. Evan rubbed his nose. "I'm not ready to ask you to forgive me." "Good. I need to understand what I'm apologizing for first. That would be good too." He nodded. As I opened the car door, he said, "Mom wants to come to the Franklin launch." I stopped. "How does she know there's a launch?" "Marcy." I closed my eyes. She asked me to find out if she and Dad are invited. They're not. Evan absorbed that without arguing. "Okay, I invited Dr. Patel, Celia, and Darlene. People who helped. People who can be happy for me without making it about you." His face tightened, but he nodded again. "I'll tell her." I got into the car. Before I closed the door, Evan handed me a small rectangular object, Dad's digital weather station sensor. "What am I supposed to do with this? You know how to connect things." I stared at him. Then he laughed. It started quietly and turned helpless. I laughed too, not because it was that funny, but because for once the joke was the task itself. He took the sensor back. "I'll figure it out," he said. And for the first time, I believed he might. He did figure it out. The next morning, he sent a photograph of the weather station mounted on the wall above Dad's television. 3 temperature readings filled the screen. "Dad says the backyard is 4 degrees colder than the garage. This has changed his life." I sent back a thumbs up. No gold star. Mom waited 2 days before calling about Franklin. "Evan says we're not invited. He asked me." I answered. "He shouldn't have been put in the middle. I didn't put him there. He's trying to keep the family together. That isn't his job. It used to be yours." She said it without thinking. We both went silent. Mom recovered first. "I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. I meant you were always the one who remembered everyone's feelings. That was a job. No one made it a job." "Then why are you angry I resigned?" She exhaled slowly. I could hear the television in the background. Dad kept the volume loud and denied it whenever anyone mentioned it. "We want to support you," she said. "You had the thesis for 6 weeks before Evan's presentation. Did you read it?" "Some." "What part?" "That's a test. It's a question." Mom was quiet long enough that I expected another vague answer. Then she surprised me. "I read the part about the woman who kept a notebook for her brother." "Darlene." You said she wasn't only tracking medication and appointments, she was also tracking everyone else's promises, who said they would drive, who forgot, who needed reminding. I sat down at my kitchen table. Mom continued, her voice less certain now. You wrote that the notebook became a record of obligations other people were allowed to forget. Yes, I read that. Before you sent it to Evan? After. The answer hurt, but it was honest. Why after? Because of the title. What about it? I thought you were accusing me. It wasn't about you. I know that now. She almost said more. I waited. But it felt like it was, she finished. There was no apology inside the sentence, but there was recognition. At that point, I could tell the difference. I'm glad you read it. Then why can't we come? Because you're reading it after giving it away. I did not give it away. You still have it. I closed my eyes. Mom, this is why. What do you think we're going to do at the launch? I think Dad will call it my hospital system. I think you'll cry. Then one of you will say the awful experience with Evan led to something good. She didn't deny it. I think you'll want credit for being proud of me now, I said, and I'll spend the whole time wondering when you'll make it about him. That's very uncharitable. It's very specific. She made a small sound that might have been a laugh if either of us had been less tired. So who is invited? Dr. Patel, Celia, Darlene, your interview person. She contributed to the work, and we didn't. The bitterness in her voice was familiar, but this time I did not rush to soften my answer. No. Mom inhaled. Maybe that's true, she said. I gripped the edge of the table. My mother admitting one clean fact felt more dangerous than one of her arguments. It made room for hope, and hope had always been the part that pulled me back before anything changed. I love you, she added. I love you too. But we still can't come. No. All right? She hung up without punishing me for the answer. For the next 10 minutes, I sat at the table looking at my phone. The Franklin launch was small enough that calling it a reception felt ambitious. Teresa had arranged coffee, fruit, and cookies in a conference room near the discharge unit. A standing sign displayed the pilot's full name, with the default daughter framework printed underneath. My name appeared below it, not hidden in the acknowledgments, not implied through family connection, printed where everyone could see it. Celia took a photograph and immediately complained that the fluorescent lights made us look ill. You cut off half the sign, I told her. I'm an administrator, not an artist. You manage community programs. Exactly. We crop things later. Darlene stood in front of the display, reading every word. They should have used a better picture of you, she said. There is no picture of me. Then they've already improved it. Dr. Patel arrived carrying the printed journal issue under one arm. She wore a dark red scarf and looked suspiciously pleased. I brought this for you, she said. I have a copy. This one is signed. I opened the cover. Celia, Teresa, Dr. Patel and several members of the discharge team had written messages inside. Darlene took the pen from me and added, "Still glamorous." During the presentation, Teresa explained why Franklin had adopted the model and what the 3-month pilot would measure. She credited the research by name each time she referenced it. Then she invited me to speak. I stood beside the sign with my notes in my hand. For half a second, I saw Evan at the lectern in his navy suit. I heard his confident voice explaining my diagram. The memory no longer made the room tilt. It simply existed beside this one. This started with a question hospitals don't usually ask, I said. Not who is legally responsible or who happens to be standing in the room, but who is actually carrying the work. I told them about the 6 extra minutes the nurse had objected to and the hours of confusion those minutes could prevent. I talked about consent, support, and the danger of turning competent people into bottomless resources. No one whispered that it was finally useful. They already knew. Afterward, Darlene hugged me. "You look terrified," she said. I was. Couldn't tell. That's my whole research topic. She laughed into my shoulder. A delivery worker arrived while we were cleaning up, carrying a vase of blue and yellow flowers. The card read, "We are proud of what you did with your work. Love, Mom and Dad." I read the sentence twice. Dr. Patel looked over my shoulder. "Acceptable," she said. "That is high praise from you." They resisted the temptation to mention themselves. I put the card in my bag. The flowers stayed at Franklin's nurses' station, where everyone could enjoy them. It felt like the right amount of receiving. Evan passed his new capstone 4 weeks later. He emailed me the result instead of calling. Professor Klein approved it. No revisions. I graduate in December. I wrote, "Congratulations. You did it." His reply came an hour later. "Can I come over tonight?" I almost asked why. Instead, I said yes. He arrived carrying takeout from the same Thai restaurant he had brought food from after Paige left. This time, he had ordered my favorite without asking Mom. "I remember things," he said when I noticed. "Sometimes." He placed the containers on my coffee table but did not open them. "I need to apologize." "You've apologized." "I've said I'm sorry. It isn't the same." I sat in the chair across from the couch. He stayed standing. "I read your thesis the night Mom sent it," he said. "Not all of it. The methods, the model, the appendix. I told myself I was looking for an angle." I said nothing. My first 2 topics had been rejected. Klein said if the third proposal wasn't workable, I might have to delay the capstone. Mom knew because I'd called her after the meeting, so she sent my file. She said you had already finished and wouldn't mind if I borrowed the practical part. You knew I would. "Yes." The answer came quickly. "I knew you'd mind," he said. "I just decided you shouldn't." He sat on the edge of the couch. I copied the intake structure into a blank presentation. I changed the labels. By the second slide, I knew it wasn't borrowing. I remembered Professor Klein's description of family intellectual property. "Why did you call it ours?" "Because ours sounded better than hers." His face twisted. I kept thinking I'd change more. Then Klein liked the model. Dad liked it. Mom kept saying this was the project that would prove they were right to fund me. Every time somebody praised it, telling the truth got more expensive. "So you let it get more expensive?" "Yes." The room was very quiet. He looked at the navy-bound thesis on my dining table. I removed the parts about gender because I thought administrators would take it more seriously. "I know. I used your interview findings to support decisions your participants were warning against. That surprised me." "You understand that now?" I had to read the article for a reflection Professor Klein assigned. Despite myself, I laughed once. "He assigned you my article. He has a sense of humor. I didn't think he did. Neither did I." Evan leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I'm sorry I took your work. I'm sorry I lied at your graduation dinner. I'm sorry I saw you in the audience and kept going." His voice broke on the last sentence. "I thought if I got through the presentation, everybody would admire me long enough that I could figure out the rest later." He looked down. "Being admired felt easier than disappointing Mom and Dad. And stealing from you felt safer because you always stayed." There it was. Not an excuse. The architecture of the choice. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I don't expect you to make that okay." I sat with the words. For months, I had imagined his apology as something that would return us to who we were before. Now I understood that who we were before was part of the problem. "I believe you," I said. His shoulders moved with one unsteady breath. "And I accept the apology." He looked up. "That doesn't mean we go back." "I know. You don't send me papers because you waited too long. You don't make me talk Mom down. You don't say you're bad at something, so I'll do it. I know. And if we have a relationship, you carry half of it. You call without needing anything. You remember things. You tell the truth in rooms where the door is open." He nodded. "I can do that. You have not established a strong record." A laugh escaped him. "Fair." We opened the food. He told me about his new capstone without asking me to review it. It was boring in the reassuring way original work often is. He had spent weeks tracking medication waste across 3 departments and discovered that most of it came from inconsistent ordering schedules. "I saved St. Vincent almost $12,000, he said. "That's genuinely useful." "I know, it was horrible. We ate until the food was cold. Before he left, he picked up the engraved pen from my coffee table. "You kept it? I like it. I knew you did." He put it back exactly where it had been. At the door, he said, "Dad thinks you'll come to my graduation. Do you want me there?" "Yes. Then invite me yourself." He nodded. "I'm inviting you. I'll come." He smiled. Not with relief exactly. Something quieter. After he left, I called Mom. I told her Evan had apologized. I told her I would attend his graduation. I did not tell her that everything was fixed. For once, she did not claim it was. 3 nights later, an unfamiliar Franklin number appeared on my phone. When I answered, Mom's voice was on the other end. "Don't panic," she said. "Your father is here. They think it's minor." Then, before I could ask what happened, she added, "The nurse wants to know who coordinates his care." "What happened?" "He got dizzy in the garage," Mom said. "He sat down before he fell. They've done an EKG and blood work. The doctor thinks his blood pressure dropped because he took his medication without eating." In the background, Dad said, "I ate." Mom covered the phone and shouted, "Peppermint candy is not breakfast. I had toast. That was yesterday." The argument was so normal that my shoulders loosened. Is he being admitted? They're keeping him for observation. He's fine enough to complain about the television. "I cannot hear it," Dad announced. "You're sitting on the remote." "I am not." A nurse said something I couldn't make out. Mom lowered her voice. "She has a form. She wants to know who manages his appointments and medication and who should get the discharge instructions." I looked at the Franklin proposal open on my laptop. "Answer her." I said, "You, Mom. You know all his information. I sent all of you the information. Evan has the calendar now. You're still his emergency contact. I said I would respond to an emergency. That doesn't make me the coordinator." Mom was quiet. The nurse's voice came closer. "Mrs. Mercer, may I speak with Lena?" Mom handed over the phone. "Hi, this is Naomi, one of the nurses on the observation unit. Your father is stable. I'm completing a care support assessment before shift change. I'm familiar with it." "Oh, I helped design it." There was a pause. "Lena Mercer?" "Yes." "Well," she said, "this is either convenient or very intimidating." Despite the tightness in my chest, I laughed. "What do you need?" "I need to establish roles for the next 48 hours. Your mother identified you as the person who usually coordinates care. Is that accurate?" "It used to be. Do you consent to take that role for this discharge?" The exact question I had fought to keep in the protocol came through the phone in a stranger's voice. "No." Mom made a hurt sound nearby. Naomi did not react. "Thank you. Is there someone else your father would like us to ask?" "Evan Mercer. He's my brother. Does he currently manage any of your father's care? He tracks appointments and prescription renewals on a shared calendar. My mother is with Dad at home." "All right. I'll speak with your father and contact Evan. I'm still coming." "That's fine. Would you like to be included in the medical update?" "Yes. And would you like any routine tasks assigned to you?" "No. Understood. No accusation, no silence loaded with disappointment." She asked, I answered, and the system moved to the next available person. Before handing the phone back, Naomi said, "For what it's worth, the question works." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." Mom came back on the line. "You're coming?" "Yes." "Then why did you tell her no?" "Because I'm coming as his daughter." "What does that mean?" "It means I'll see you soon." I called Evan from the car. He answered on the first ring. Mom called. "I'm leaving St. Vincent now. Dad's stable." "I know." She opened with, "Don't panic." So I assumed either he was dying or the cable went out. "Blood pressure drop. They're keeping him overnight. I have his medication list, but I don't know if it's current. Ask Mom to photograph the bottles. She'll photograph her thumb, then ask her to bring them." He sighed. "Right. Naomi will call you. She's doing the coordinator assessment." There was a short silence. "She asked you first?" "Mom volunteered me." "And you said no?" "Yes." "Okay. No guilt. No request that I reconsider." "I'll meet you there," he said. Franklin's observation unit was on the 3rd floor, 2 hallways away from the conference room where we had launched the pilot. The standing sign was gone, but a smaller poster hung beside the nurse's station. Who is actually carrying the care? Underneath were the 4 questions from my protocol. Someone had placed a small gold sticker beside the final one. Has this person agreed? I stopped long enough to read it even though I knew every word. Naomi recognized me before I introduced myself. She was tall, with dark curls pulled into a knot and purple glasses that slipped down her nose when she looked at the tablet in her hand. "Your father's in 7, she said. "He's annoyed, which is generally reassuring. Did you reach Evan? He's on his way. Your father chose him as the coordinator." I looked toward room 7. He did, after some discussion. What kind of discussion? Naomi smiled. The kind where someone says, "Call my daughter, she handles that," and the nurse asks whether the daughter has agreed. I felt heat behind my eyes. What did he say? He said, "Apparently not." Then he named your brother. Naomi's tone was light, but she did not make the moment smaller than it was. "Thank you," I said. "He also informed me that you developed the form. How?" "Your mother has told everyone on the unit." Of course she had. Dad was sitting upright in bed, wearing a hospital gown and his own socks. Mom had placed his folded clothes on the windowsill and arranged his shoes beneath the chair with the toes facing out. He looked pale, but not fragile. A paper cup of ice water sat on the tray in front of him beside a packet of crackers he had opened badly. "There she is," he said. Mom stood and hugged me. "You took forever. It's been 32 minutes. There was no traffic." There was traffic. She took my coat anyway and hung it over the back of a chair. Dad held out the cracker packet. "Can you open this?" One corner was already torn. "You opened it. It split wrong." I took the packet, widened the opening, and handed it back. Dad shook 2 crackers into his palm. "See? You know how to do things." Mom gave him a look. "What?" he asked. "It was a cracker." "It's never the cracker," I said. Dad looked at me, then laughed once. "Apparently." I sat beside the bed. "What did the doctor say? They don't know anything yet." Mom answered from behind me. "They said dehydration combined with the blood pressure medication and the muscle relaxer from his shoulder. I was not dehydrated. Your urine looked like iced tea." Dad stared at her. "Do we have to discuss that with the whole family? You told the nurse you drink 6 glasses of water a day. I do. Coffee is not water. It is made with water." I let them argue until Mom ran out of beverages to disqualify. Then Dad said, "They want Evan handling the instructions." I heard. "He has the calendar." "Yes. He makes it too complicated." "Also yes." Dad picked at the cracker crumbs on his blanket. "I told them to call you. I know. Habit." The word was not an apology, but it was the first time he had called the pattern what it was. I touched the edge of the tray. "I'll listen to the medical update. I'm not taking the folder home." There's a folder. There will be. Mom sat in the chair on the other side of the bed. "Nobody's asking you to take anything home." All 3 of us looked at her. She folded her arms. "Fine. I probably would have asked." Naomi returned with the doctor, who explained that Dad's tests were reassuring. They wanted to monitor him overnight, reduce one medication, and schedule a follow-up with his regular physician. Dad asked whether he could still work in the garage. The doctor asked what he did in the garage. Things. No power tools for 48 hours. "What about hand tools?" "Rick," Mom said. The doctor looked at me. "Are you coordinating the follow-up?" Before I could answer, Dad said, "My son is. Not my daughter usually does. Not she's better at this. My son is." The doctor made a note. "We'll review everything with him when he arrives." Dad's gaze met mine. Neither of us mentioned the sentence. Mom left to find coffee. As soon as she was gone, Dad said, "She's been walking around like the hospital belongs to you. It doesn't." She showed the poster to 2 nurses who work here. That sounds like her. He ate another cracker. "I read your article." I looked at him. "All of it?" "I skipped some chart stuff." Honest. I read the part about people confusing capability with consent. My throat tightened. Dad looked toward the window. It was dark outside now, turning the glass into a reflection of the room. I thought you could handle things, he said. I could. That's what I mean. It's not the compliment you think it is. I know that now. He rubbed the blanket between his fingers. With your brother, I always figured if we didn't push him forward, he'd drift. You never drifted. So you pushed him and leaned on me. Dad made a face. That sounds like one of your thesis sentences. It's free this time. He smiled, but it disappeared quickly. When you asked about help with school, I thought you'd manage without it. I did, I know. And you used that to prove you were right not to help. He looked down. Yes. The answer was so quiet I almost missed it. I should have helped, he said. Maybe not with everything. We couldn't do everything twice. But something. Mostly, I should not have laughed. I did not rescue him from the silence after that. He continued. I knew Evan was using your work before the presentation. Your mother said he was building on it. I didn't ask enough questions because I wanted his project to be good. You wanted the money to be worth it. That too. And when you saw the slides? I knew it was more than she'd said, but you still told me he made it useful. Dad pressed his lips together. I was proud of him. I know. And I did not want to understand what that meant about you. There was the apology, or the closest version my father knew how to give. I'm sorry, Lena. I looked at his face, at the familiar line between his eyebrows and the hospital bracelet loose around his wrist. I love you, I said. His eyes filled. That's not the same as saying it was okay. I know. And I'm not taking everything back. The accounts? The work? He nodded. Your brother changed the utility password. Good. Nobody knows what it is now. Then he'll reset it. Dad sighed, but there was a smile under it. Mom returned carrying 3 coffees and a tea she had not ordered. She handed me the cup with no sugar, gave Dad decaf despite his complaints, and sat down with the tea. Evan's parking, she said. Dad reached for his coffee. Mom moved it farther from the edge of the tray. He already almost spilled the water, she told me. I did not. You hit the cup. It stayed upright. I drank my coffee. No one asked me to settle it. Mom followed me into the hallway when I went to throw away my empty cup. I owe you an apology, too, she said. I stopped beside the nurse's station. She held the tea in both hands without drinking it. I should not have sent Evan your thesis. No, I thought, because you had finished, it couldn't hurt you. It wasn't used up. I understand that, do you? I'm trying. That was more believable than certainty. Mom looked through the doorway at Dad. Every time Evan struggled, I felt like if we didn't solve it immediately, something terrible would happen. With you, I thought taking a little wouldn't matter because you always had more. I didn't. I know. Her eyes filled, but she did not use the tears as a request. I'm sorry I lied about the binding, she said. I'm sorry I asked you to sign that statement. I'm sorry I said he could do something with your work and you couldn't. The last sentence nearly broke her voice. I don't think that now. You did then, yes. I appreciated the lack of defense more than the apology itself. She wiped beneath one eye with her thumb. Can we ever get past this? I can have a relationship with you. That's not what I asked. It's what I can answer. What does that relationship look like? You invite me. You don't assign me. If I say no, you let it mean no. Every time? Yes. She gave a tiny, unhappy laugh. I'm going to be bad at that. Probably. But you won't disappear the first time I get it wrong. That depends what you do after. Mom considered that. All right. It was not a promise that everything would be easy. It was a promise that she understood difficulty no longer entitled her to my surrender. Evan came around the corner carrying Dad's medication bag, his laptop, and the small weather station sensor. I stared at the sensor. He insisted I bring it, Evan said. Dad called from the room. I want to compare the hospital temperature. You have a weather app on your phone. I said. "He says that only gives outside temperature." Mom took the medication bag from Evan. "You brought the wrong blood pressure bottle. This is the one on the list. He has a newer one." "Then why isn't it on the list?" "Because you made the calendar too complicated." Evan looked at me. I lifted both hands. "I'm visiting." He closed his eyes briefly. "Right." Then he turned back to Mom. "Show me the newer bottle when you get home. I'll update it." Naomi brought the discharge planning folder even though Dad would not leave until morning. She reviewed each roll. Mom would stay overnight and make sure he ate before taking medication. Evan would schedule the follow-up and update the medication list. Dad would drink actual water and leave the garage alone for 48 hours. Naomi looked at me. "Lena is emergency backup," Evan said, "not routine coordination." She checked the box. Dad took the folder. For one familiar second, he extended it toward me. His hand stopped halfway across the bed. Then he turned and held it out to Evan. "You're the coordinator." Evan accepted it. "I have it." I stayed another hour. Dad complained about the hospital socks. Mom peeled the label from her teacup in one long strip. Evan connected the weather sensor and announced that the room was 73 degrees with 38% humidity. When I put on my coat, Dad looked surprised. "You're leaving? I have work tomorrow. You could stay for the next update." "Evan has it." He glanced at my brother, who was entering the follow-up number into the shared calendar. "Right," Dad said. Mom kissed my cheek. "Dinner Sunday?" "Not this Sunday." She pressed her lips together. Then she nodded. "Another time." I hugged Dad carefully, avoiding the monitor wire across his chest. "Eat breakfast," I said. "Yes, Master Mercer." I laughed against his shoulder. At the door, I looked back. The folder was open on Evan's lap. Mom was reading the medication changes over his shoulder, and Dad was arguing that coffee should count toward his daily fluids. They were confused, capable, irritating adults. They were also managing. I walked down the hall carrying my coat, my purse, and nothing that belonged to anyone else.